The Boy Who Wove Shadows Chapter 1, The Garden Sanctuary. The bell shrieked, a sound Caleb had come to associate with not freedom, but a different kind of confinement. It was just another hour until he could finally escape, but first, there was the gauntlet of the hallway, then the walk home where the quiet dread of what he might find at the end of it often felt heavier than any textbook. His latest report card, crumpled and unread in the bottom of his backpack, was a testament to the static his home life created in his brain, muffling every lesson, every attempt to focus. Numbers and words blurred, replaced by the ghost of slurred voices and the clink of bottles from the night before. His underperformance in class was just another symptom of a home that offered no stability, only chaos. Today, the usual taunts had escalated. Recess had ended with a sickening crunch of earth and laughter as Liam, the self-proclaimed king of their grade, and his cronies had cornered Caleb by the old oak tree. They'd pushed him down, held him, and methodically, almost casually, buried him up to his chest in loose soil, their jeers about his dirt-poor family echoing in his ears. He'd waited, silent and still, for the bell to save him, feeling the heavy weight of the world pressing down, literally and figuratively. Now, with the final dismissal, Caleb sidestepped the bustling groups, his gaze fixed on the cracked pavement ahead. He didn't head straight home. Instead, his worn sneakers instinctively turned down a side street, leading him away from the familiar rows of houses and towards the neglected perimeter of the old city botanical garden. Most kids his age found it creepy, with its iron gates rusting and its pathways overgrown. But for Caleb, its wildness was a comfort. It felt abandoned, just like him, and in its quiet decay, he found a strange kind of peace. He slipped through a gap in the fence no one else seemed to notice, the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms wrapping around him like a familiar, protective cloak. He needed to be here, to breathe, before facing whatever awaited him at home. Caleb walked deeper into the garden, the sounds of the city gradually fading behind him, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of birds. He bypassed the more open, manicured sections, heading instead for a less trodden path that wound its way towards the back corner, near the crumbling stone wall. This was his spot, a small clearing hidden by a curtain of overgrown jasmine and a sprawling, ancient wisteria vine. Here, a fallen log covered in moss served as his makeshift bench. He sank onto it, pulling his knees up to his chest, the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves a familiar comfort. He didn't think about the school, or Liam, or the cold, hard reality waiting for him at home. Instead, his eyes drifted over the tangle of green, picking out the delicate veins on a broad leaf, the way the light dappled through the canopy, creating shifting patterns on the ground. He reached into his backpack, not for a textbook, but for a worn sketchbook and a stub of a pencil. Slowly, almost subconsciously, his hand began to move, tracing the intricate spiral of a fern, losing himself in the lines and shadows. For a brief time, the world outside the garden, with all its sharp edges and disappointments, ceased to exist. He stayed there until the sky began to bleed into hues of orange and purple, a silent signal that his time of reprieve was ending. With a sigh that felt too heavy for a kid his age, Caleb closed his sketchbook, tucked it away, and started his slow walk back towards the gap in the fence, bracing himself for whatever awaited him beyond the garden's gates. Chapter 2, The Seed Awakens. The next morning brought with it the same grey dread, but also a sliver of anticipation for his return to the garden. After another day of navigating the subtle cruelties of school and enduring the tense silence broken by the occasional harsh word at home, Caleb found himself once again slipping through the familiar gap in the fence. The air in the garden felt different today, heavier, perhaps, or charged with an unspoken energy. He made his way to his usual spot, but as he approached the ancient wisteria, something glinted faintly beneath the gnarled roots of a sprawling, unnamed tree just beyond his log. It wasn't the usual discarded candy wrapper or fallen leaf. This was something else entirely. Caleb hesitated. His first instinct was to retreat, to ignore it. The garden was his sanctuary precisely because it was predictable in its wildness, a place where he didn't have to face anything new or challenging. But the glint held his gaze, a tiny spark of something unnatural in the organic chaos. Curiosity, a feeling he rarely indulged, began to prick at him. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his eyes fixed on the spot. He knelt slowly, pushing aside a curtain of tangled vines and damp earth, revealing it. It was a small, ornate wooden box, no bigger than his hand. Its surface was carved with incredibly intricate patterns that seemed to shift and intertwine, like the very roots it had been buried beneath. There was no visible lock, no hinge, no seam where it could be opened. It looked ancient, almost alive, pulsing with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. Caleb reached out a finger, tracing one of the carvings, a strange mix of apprehension and fascination tingling through him. He tried to pry at its edges, to find a seam or a hidden latch, but it was solid, a perfectly smooth, seamless block of wood. No matter how he prodded or twisted, the box remained stubbornly closed, an enigma wrapped in ancient wood. Disappointment mingled with a persistent sense of wonder. What was it? And why was it here, half buried in the forgotten corner of his sanctuary? He considered leaving it, but an irresistible pull, a quiet voice in his mind, urged him to keep it. It felt important, destined somehow. Carefully, Caleb tucked the small, warm box deep into an inner pocket of his worn backpack, right beside his sketchbook. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible tremor from it against his back as he stood up. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. He lingered a moment longer, looking back at the gnarled roots where the box had rested, then sighed, and made his way out of the garden, the weight of the mysterious object a new, curious presence in his world. Chapter 3, Unveiled Power. The next day at school was, predictably, no better. The air hung thick with unspoken tension, and Caleb felt it in his bones. Liam and his usual crew seemed to have a fresh supply of venom. It started subtly, a tripped foot in the hallway, a whispered insult about his patched-up shoes. Caleb tried to make himself smaller, to disappear into the background as he always did, but today they were relentless. During lunch, the inevitable happened. Caleb had found a secluded corner in the cafeteria, trying to eat his meager sandwich in peace. But Liam, his eyes glinting with malice, deliberately accidentally knocked Caleb's tray, sending his sandwich and apple skittering across the floor, quickly followed by a splash of milk. Laughter erupted from Liam's friends, loud and derisive, echoing through the crowded room. "Oops, clumsy, aren't we, dirtboy?" Liam sneered, towering over Caleb, who was crouched, staring at the ruined food. "Looks like you're eating off the floor again, just like home, huh?" A hot wave of humiliation and familiar helplessness washed over Caleb. His hands clenched into fists, not because he wanted to fight, but because the anger, the injustice, had nowhere else to go. His breath hitched in his throat. In that exact moment, a strange, tingling warmth spread from his back, where the wooden box rested, flowing through his shoulders and down his arms. It wasn't unpleasant, but intensely foreign, like a surge of static electricity, but warmer. Suddenly, without thinking, without even meaning to, Caleb looked up at Liam. And just as his eyes met Liam's cruel grin, the lights in the cafeteria flickered violently, then the overhead fan above Liam's head began to spin wildly, faster and faster, making a terrible groaning sound. Then, with a loud pop and a shower of harmless sparks, it suddenly stopped, going completely dead. The cheerful, blaring pop music from the cafeteria speakers cut out abruptly, plunging the room into an eerie silence, broken only by the sudden gasps and murmurs of the other students. Liam, his sneer frozen, looked up at the dead fan, then back at Caleb, a flicker of genuine confusion, almost fear, replacing his usual arrogance. Caleb himself felt a profound shock, a shiver running down his spine. The warmth in his hands faded, leaving behind a subtle thrumming sensation. He hadn't done anything. Or had he? Caleb stared, wide-eyed, not at Liam, but at the suddenly inert fan and the silent speakers. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a mixture of terror and a terrifying, exhilarating possibility. He hadn't touched anything. He hadn't done anything. Yet, the warmth that had surged through him, that strange, electric thrumming, had coincided precisely with the mechanical failure. A shiver, colder than fear, ran down his spine. It was impossible, wasn't it? He was just Caleb, the kid who was invisible, the one no one noticed. This couldn't be his doing. But the sudden, absolute silence in the cafeteria, so stark after the chaotic noise, spoke volumes. Liam, who had been mid-sneer, looked genuinely unnerved. His eyes flickered from the dead fan to Caleb, then back again, a pale imitation of his usual swagger. What was that? He stammered, his voice lacking its usual bite. His cronies, too, looked less amused and more unsettled. The general cafeteria chatter had died down to a nervous murmur. Students, mid-bite, or mid-conversation, were looking up at the silent fan, then around at each other, then, inevitably, at Caleb and Liam. The spilled milk and scattered food on the floor suddenly seemed less important than the uncanny stillness that had fallen over the room. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, the principal's voice, tinny and distorted, crackled over the emergency intercom system. "Attention students, we're experiencing a minor electrical issue. Please remain calm. Staff will be with you shortly." The words, though meant to reassure, only highlighted the strangeness of the event. Liam, clearly flustered and no longer interested in tormenting Caleb with an audience that was now staring at him and the strange circumstances, muttered, "Let's go," to his friends and quickly shuffled away, leaving Caleb alone in his corner, staring at the ruined lunch and the dead fan, the mysterious wooden box a subtle, constant pressure against his back. He felt a profound sense of isolation, but also, for the very first time, a flicker of something new, a terrifying, exhilarating power. Chapter 4, The Healer's Touch. Caleb didn't pick up his spilled lunch. The scattered food and splashed milk seemed utterly irrelevant in the face of what had just happened. He felt a tremor in his hands, a residual phantom of the warmth and the strange thrumming that had coursed through him. Too overwhelmed to even process it, he just grabbed his backpack, the wooden box pressing a comforting, yet terrifying, weight against his spine, and stumbled out of the cafeteria, ignoring the lingering stares. He needed air. He needed out. He needed his garden. He spent the rest of the school day in a daze, every minor electrical hum, every flicker of a fluorescent light, making him jump. Was he imagining it? Was it a coincidence? His mind replayed Liam's unnerved face, the sudden silence, the dead fan. It couldn't have been him. He couldn't do that. The thought was both exhilarating and profoundly frightening. As soon as the final bell shrieked its relief, Caleb was out the door and running, not walking, towards the familiar, comforting wildness of the botanical garden. He slipped through the gap in the fence, seeking the solace of his hidden spot. He sank onto the mossy log, pulling out the small wooden box. It felt perfectly inert now, just a piece of carved wood. He turned it over and over in his hands, searching for a clue, a seam, anything. But there was nothing. "What are you?" he whispered to it, his voice raw. "What did you do?" He thought about the dead fan, about the electric surge he'd felt. He focused, trying to recreate the feeling, but nothing happened. He just felt tired, drained by the day's events and the gnawing anxiety. The next few days were a blur of nervous attempts and frustrating failures. Caleb tried to focus the strange energy he'd felt, to replicate the sensation. He concentrated on flickering streetlights, tried to silence the annoying hum of the school projector, even attempted to speed up the slow-moving clock in his classroom. Nothing. The box remained a silent, unyielding enigma in his backpack. He began to think it had all been a bizarre coincidence, a figment of his overstressed imagination. The brief surge of terrifying power faded into a crushing wave of despair. He was still just Caleb, the invisible, the broken. Then, late one afternoon, back in his garden sanctuary, a small, injured bird fluttered down from a branch, landing clumsily at his feet. Its wing was bent at an unnatural angle, and it chirped weakly, trembling. Caleb's heart ached with a familiar helplessness. He knew that feeling, that vulnerability. A profound wave of empathy, mixed with a deep-seated frustration at his own inability to fix anything, washed over him. He instinctively reached out, his hand hovering over the tiny creature. And as he did, focusing all his quiet, desperate will on the bird, a familiar, warm thrumming began deep within him, starting from his back where the box rested. This time, it wasn't chaotic. It felt focused, directed. He felt a gentle pulse, almost a hum, flowing through his arm and into his fingertips. The air around the bird shimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly. He watched, breath held, as the bird's injured wing slowly, impossibly, straightened itself. The tiny creature chirped, louder this time, then hopped once, twice, testing its restored wing before launching itself into the air, soaring back towards the branches, perfectly whole. Caleb stared after it, his mouth agape. His hands still tingled, and the warmth in his back lingered. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't imagination. This time, he had been trying. And it had worked. The box pulsed faintly, a silent confirmation. He didn't know how, or why, but he had done something. And for the first time in a very long time, the familiar ache in his chest was replaced by a fragile, terrifying, exhilarating hope. He had a power. And perhaps, just perhaps, it wasn't only for breaking things. Chapter 5, Elias, the old mage. The realization hit Caleb like a physical blow, leaving him breathless. He had healed the bird. The quiet thrumming of the box against his back felt like a heartbeat, strong and steady. This wasn't chaos, it was control. A deep-seated need to understand, to know why and how, surged through him, eclipsing the fear. He looked down at the wooden box in his hand, then out into the dense, overgrown garden. The ancient wisteria, the gnarled trees, they seemed to hum with a new, subtle energy, as if the garden itself was whispering secrets to him. He spent hours trying to replicate the feeling, not with raw force, but with focus, with empathy. He gently touched wilting leaves, picturing them vibrant and green. He concentrated on a broken branch, willing it to mend. Sometimes a faint warmth returned, a subtle flicker, but nothing as dramatic as with the bird. It was elusive, tied to something deeper than just wishing. One afternoon, a week after the cafeteria incident, Caleb was sitting in his usual spot, sketching the intricate patterns of moss on a stone. He felt the familiar thrum from the box. Looking up, he noticed something he'd never seen before, or perhaps never truly noticed. Beyond a usual thicket of trees, where the garden became even wilder and more remote, there was a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air, a distortion that caught the light strangely. It was like heat haze, but there was no heat. Curiosity, now a bolder companion, tugged at him. He packed his sketchbook and the box, and pushing through thorny bushes and tangled vines, he ventured deeper than he ever had before. The garden grew darker, the trees taller, their branches laced together forming a dense canopy. The city sounds vanished completely, replaced by the deep rustle of unseen creatures and the wind whispering through ancient leaves. The air grew colder, but the box against his back pulsed with a steady warmth, guiding him. Finally, nestled in a particularly dense part of the overgrowth, almost entirely swallowed by towering evergreens and thick ivy, he saw it. It was a small, dilapidated shed, made of dark, weathered wood, so covered in moss and climbing plants that it looked like a natural part of the forest floor. A wisp of smoke curled lazily from a crooked chimney, and a faint, flickering light pulsed from a single, tiny window. It looked ancient, forgotten, and utterly out of place. As Caleb approached, his heart pounding, a voice, raspy yet surprisingly clear, drifted from inside the shed. "It took you long enough, young one. I thought that old box had lost its touch, but it seems patience truly is a virtue." Caleb froze. He took a hesitant step back, ready to bolt. But then the tiny, wooden door creaked open, revealing a sliver of warm, glowing light. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the inner glow, was an old man with a long, unkempt white beard that reached his waist. He wore robes patched with vibrant, mismatched fabrics, and his eyes, though ancient, sparkled with an intelligent, knowing light. "Don't be alarmed, Caleb," the old man said, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Come in. We have much to discuss about the gift you carry, and about why I placed that seed of the old magic in your path." He gestured inside with a hand gnarled like a tree root. "I believe you're quite curious about how you managed to fix that bird's wing, and perhaps, even how you managed to discourage that rather unpleasant young man at your school." Caleb sat on the small stool, gripping his backpack, the ornate wooden box now pulsing with a distinct warmth against his back. Elias, the wizard, settled into a worn armchair opposite him, a gentle smile on his ancient face. The shed, filled with the scent of dried herbs and the soft glow of unseen enchantments, felt more real than the bustling city just beyond the garden walls. "That box you carry, Caleb," Elias began, his voice a low, resonant hum, "is a seed of the old magic. It doesn't give you power, rather, it awakens what was always dormant within you. It's an anchor, a focal point for the natural energies that flow through the world, and now, through you." He paused, his gaze sharp yet kind. "You see, true magic isn't about grand gestures or flashy spells. It's about connection. Connection to the life force around us, to the very essence of creation and decay." He leaned forward slightly. "Think back to the cafeteria. The anger, the humiliation you felt. It was a raw, uncontrolled burst of energy. The box amplified it, focused it on Liam, and the nearest vulnerable source of power, the fan, bore the brunt. It was destructive, yes, but it was also a spark, a testament to the power stirring within you." Caleb flinched, remembering the sudden silence, Liam's startled face. "But, the bird," he murmured, "I didn't mean to hurt anything then. I just wanted to help." Elias nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Precisely. That was the moment the seed truly took root. When your will aligned with compassion, when you sought to mend rather than break, the magic flowed differently. It wasn't about raw force, but about harmony, about nudging life back into its proper balance. That is the true gift, Caleb, the ability to weave the threads of the world." The wizard reached for a thick, leather-bound book from a nearby shelf, its pages brittle with age. "For centuries, this garden has been a haven for such energies, a place where the veil between our world and the unseen is thin. I have been its guardian, tending not just to the plants, but to the ebb and flow of the magic that permeates its soil. I placed that box where I did, knowing that eventually, someone with the right heart, a heart that felt both the weight of the world and the spark of genuine empathy, would find it. You, Caleb, are that someone." Caleb's mind reeled. A wizard. Magic. A hidden power within him. It was a lot to take in, but a strange sense of belonging began to settle over him, replacing the familiar feeling of being out of place. He wasn't just a poor kid with drunk parents and school bullies. He was something more. "So, what now?" Caleb asked, his voice gaining a new, tentative strength. "What do I do with this magic?" Elias smiled, a warmth spreading from his eyes that reached Caleb's very core. Now, young Caleb, you begin to learn. To understand. To master. The garden is filled with lessons, and your own heart holds the key to unlocking its greatest potentials. We will start with small things, with listening to the whispers of the plants, with understanding the subtle energies of the earth. But know this, with great power comes not just responsibility, but also great purpose. The world has many wounds, young one. And sometimes, it takes a quiet, observant soul like yours to begin to heal them. Chapter 6, First Steps in the Old Magic. Caleb felt a surge of quiet triumph, not for performing a grand feat of magic, but for the simple act of listening and understanding. Elias's confirmation, you heard them, resonated deeply. It was a skill, a connection, that felt entirely his own, unlike anything else in his difficult life. What's next, then? Caleb asked, a newfound eagerness in his voice. How do I speak their language? Elias's smile widened, revealing a missing tooth. Speaking is a more active art, young Caleb. It requires not just listening, but also intention and a guiding hand. The world is full of imbalances, of things that are broken or lost. Your magic, the seed within you, is a tool for restoration, for bringing things back into harmony. He walked over to a small, gnarled sapling in a pot, its leaves a sickly yellow. Take this poor specimen, for instance. It struggles. It wants to thrive, but something impedes it. Last week, you allowed your emotions to run wild, and the magic lashed out, breaking. When you healed the bird, you listened to its need and allowed the magic to flow, to mend. Now, you must learn to direct that flow with conscious intent, to understand the why behind its struggle and guide it towards health. He picked up a small, smooth river stone from a bowl on his workbench and handed it to Caleb. Hold this. It is a conduit, a simple focus. Close your eyes. Feel the sapling's distress, its yearning for life. Then, draw upon the warmth of the seed within you, that energy from the box. Imagine it flowing through you, into the stone, and then into the sapling, like a gentle, healing light. Picture its leaves turning green, its roots strengthening, its trunk growing straight. Caleb took the stone. It felt cool and smooth against his palm. He held it above the sickly sapling, his eyes falling shut. He cleared his mind, pushing away the persistent thoughts of school and home. He focused on the sapling, trying to connect with the faint whisper of its struggle. The warmth from the box in his backpack began to spread, slowly, a comforting heat that filled his chest and flowed down his arm, into the stone. He imagined green, vibrant, healthy green. He saw the sapling strong and tall, reaching for the sun. It wasn't a sudden burst, but a steady, deliberate flow of energy. When he opened his eyes, the change was undeniable. The sapling, though not fully restored, had lost its sickly pallor. A few of its yellow leaves had turned a faint, hopeful green, and the tiny stem seemed to have straightened ever so slightly. The air around it felt lighter, cleaner. Caleb felt exhilarated, a jolt of pure joy unlike anything he had ever experienced. He had truly done something. Good, Elias murmured, observing with a keen eye. Very good, young one. You are learning to direct the current. But remember, magic is not a quick fix. It is a partnership with nature. It assists, it guides, it accelerates, but it does not defy the natural order. This sapling will still need sun and water, but now, it has a better chance. Chapter 7, The Test of Restraint. As days turned into weeks, Caleb's visits to Elias's shed became the anchor of his life. He learned to differentiate between subtle energies, to feel the health of a plant, the flow of water underground, even the faint hum of the city's power grid. Elias taught him not just to mend, but to understand the interconnectedness of things. He learned to coax dormant seeds to sprout with a gentle touch, to make wilted flowers bloom again with focused intent, even to subtly influence the growth patterns of small vines to form intricate, living patterns, much like the designs in his sketchbook. His art, once a solitary escape, now felt intertwined with his magic. He sketched the patterns of energy he felt, the invisible currents that animated the garden. The box, the seat of the old magic, hummed a constant, reassuring presence against his back, sometimes vibrating slightly when he was particularly attuned. But the real world, as always, lingered. The situation at home remained unchanged, a persistent dull ache. And at school, Liam and his friends, while wary of Caleb after the cafeteria incident, still found ways to make his life miserable, though they kept a wider berth. They muttered insults, tripped him when they thought no one was looking, and continued to spread rumors about him. Caleb, armed with his new knowledge, now found himself fighting the urge to react, to let the magic surge and strike back. Elias had warned him about the dangers of uncontrolled power, of using magic for vengeance. Magic born of anger consumes the wielder, young Caleb, Elias had said, his voice grave. It twists the spirit. Your gift is for healing, for balance. Do not let their darkness infect your light. It was a constant struggle. One cold afternoon, Liam had cornered Caleb near the bike racks, not alone this time, but with two larger, older boys from the high school. They had taken Caleb's worn backpack, tossing it between them like a toy, laughing as they threatened to throw it onto the roof. Caleb's heart hammered. His sketchbook, his new magic notes, and the precious wooden box were inside. A hot, familiar surge of anger, intensified by fear for the box, flared within him. He felt the seed thrumming, urging him to unleash its power. Just as the oldest boy wound up to throw Caleb's backpack onto the school roof, a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the air. What do you think you're doing? All four boys froze. Mr. Harrison, the stern but fair history teacher, stood a few yards away, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the scene. He had a reputation for seeing everything, even when he seemed to be looking elsewhere. The older boy instantly dropped Caleb's backpack, which landed with a soft thud on the asphalt. Liam and his friends visibly deflated, their bravado evaporating instantly. Nothing, Mr. Harrison, Liam mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Just, playing. Playing. Mr. Harrison's voice was deceptively calm, but Caleb knew that tone. It looked a lot like harassment from where I'm standing. Hand over that backpack, Liam, and then all three of you can come with me to Principal Stern's office. Now. Liam, looking utterly defeated, reluctantly picked up Caleb's backpack and handed it back to him. Caleb clutched it, the familiar weight a profound relief. The warmth from the box in his pocket settled, and the angry thrumming faded, replaced by a steady, quiet pulse. He met Mr. Harrison's eyes, a silent wave of gratitude passing between them. As Liam and the older boys trudged sullenly behind a history teacher, Caleb remained by the bike racks, his backpack held tight. He hadn't used his power. He hadn't unleashed the chaotic force he'd felt rising within him. He had almost succumbed, but something, the thought of Elias's words, the image of the healed bird, the simple, unexpected intervention had stopped him. He felt drained, but also a new kind of strength. It wasn't the strength of raw power, but the strength of restraint. The lessons in the garden were about more than just magic, they were about mastery over himself. That evening, back in the quiet sanctuary of the shed, Caleb recounted the incident to Elias. He left out no detail, the backpack being tossed, the rising fury, the electric thrum of the seed, and the timely, almost miraculous, appearance of Mr. Harrison. He spoke of the terrifying urge to lash out, the battle within him, and the subsequent relief mixed with a lingering sense of unease. Elias listened patiently, his ancient eyes fixed on Caleb, nodding occasionally. When Caleb finished, the wizard took a moment of silence, stroking his long white beard. You faced a true test today, young Caleb, Elias finally said, his voice soft but resonant. And you passed. Not by wielding power, but by choosing not to. That is a far greater magic than any destructive burst. It shows self-mastery, a rare and precious quality. Caleb looked down at his hands, remembering the tingling. But it was so hard, he confessed. I wanted to make them hurt. For touching my things, for everything. The box felt like it wanted me to. The seed responds to your will, Caleb, Elias explained gently. It is a force, a conduit. If your will is consumed by anger, it will channel that anger. If your will is focused on healing, it will channel that. It is a mirror to your intent. Today, when faced with raw provocation, you wrestled with your lower self and chose the higher path. That choice, more than any spell, defines you as a wielder of true magic. He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. The world will test you again, perhaps in even more subtle ways. The urges will return. But remember this feeling, the calm that came after the storm, the strength of restraint. Your gift is not merely to change the world around you, but to change yourself. Caleb nodded slowly, processing Elias's words. He had felt that calm, that unexpected strength. The battle hadn't been against Liam, but within his own heart. The wooden box, the seed, no longer felt like a mere source of power, but a living partner, a reflection of his own developing spirit. He had learned to listen to the garden, to the plants. Now, he realized, he was also learning to listen to himself, to the deeper currents of his own being. He was still the quiet kid, the one from the broken home, but he was also something else entirely. He was a student of balance, a fledgling guardian of harmony, and he was beginning to understand that his greatest power lay not in what he could destroy, but in what he could choose to create and to heal. Chapter 8, The Shadow Attacks. The weeks that followed were a period of intense growth for Caleb. Under Elias's tutelage, he delved deeper into the subtle arts of the old magic. He learned to sense the hidden pathways of water beneath the earth, to encourage reluctant blossoms, and even to quiet the chaotic energy of storm clouds gathering overhead. His sketchbook filled with not just plant life, but diagrams of energy flows and symbols Elias taught him. The wooden box, the seed, felt less like an external object and more like an extension of himself, a constant, warm hum against his spirit. His daily struggles at home and school hadn't vanished, but they no longer consumed him. He had a sanctuary, a purpose, a secret world where he was not just seen, but powerful. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves in the botanical garden began to turn vibrant shades of red and gold, Caleb was inside the shed, meticulously mending a cracked clay pot under Elias's watchful eye. The wizard was explaining the intricate energy flow needed for cohesion, demonstrating with a steady hand. Suddenly, the usually tranquil atmosphere of the shed shifted. The gentle hum of the magical artifacts around them faltered. The flickering light from the single window dimmed, as if a great shadow had fallen over the garden. Elias's eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, narrowed, and his posture stiffened. He moved with surprising swiftness for his age, placing himself subtly in front of Caleb. The air grew cold, heavy with a palpable sense of malice that made the hair on Caleb's arms stand on end. The seed pulsed violently against his back, not with a gentle warmth, but with an urgent, almost painful throb. A low, guttural growl echoed from somewhere outside the shed, followed by the snapping of branches and the sickening sound of ancient tree roots tearing. "What is it, Elias?" Caleb whispered, his heart hammering. "A darkness," Elias murmured, his voice grim. "One that seeks to consume, to corrupt. It has found us." The shed door, despite being latched, shuddered violently, splinters of wood flying inwards. A cold, unnatural wind swept through the cracks, extinguishing the hearth fire with a hiss. From the darkness beyond the threshold, Two malevolent points of glowing red light pierced the gloom, accompanied by a chilling, non-human snarl. A shadow, vast and formless yet intensely menacing, pressed against the door, trying to force its way in. It was a force of pure negation, hungry for the magic that vibrated within the garden and Elias's small sanctuary. The shed door splintered and burst inward with a sickening crack, spraying wood shards across the floor. In the gaping maw of the doorway, framed by the deepening twilight of the garden, coalesced a form born of nightmare. It wasn't a creature of flesh and blood, but a swirling mass of inky shadow, vaguely humanoid in shape, yet impossibly tall and gaunt. Its limbs stretched and contorted like smoke, and where a face should have been, two pinpricks of malevolent red light burned with chilling intensity. A low, rasping sound, like dry leaves scuttling across a tombstone, emanated from its form, a sound that seemed to suck the very warmth from the air. This was the dark force Elias had spoken of, a creature of pure negation, drawn by the vibrant hum of the old magic within the garden. Its immediate action was a surge forward, a silent, predatory lunge directly at Elias. Caleb, pressed behind the wizard, felt a primal, suffocating fear seize him. It was a cold dread that went deeper than anything Liam had ever inflicted, a terror that threatened to paralyze him. His hands trembled, and the warm pulse of the seed of the old magic in his backpack intensified, not with a gentle warmth now, but with an urgent, almost painful throb, mirroring his own terror. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to make himself invisible as he always had. But then, Elias's voice, though strained, cut through the fog of his fear. "Do not let fear control your power, Caleb." The words resonated, a lifeline to the lessons in the garden, to the quiet strength he had been cultivating. He looked at Elias, standing resolute, a shimmering golden shield his only defense against the encroaching shadow. Elias, who had seen him, who had given him purpose. Caleb's gaze flickered to the red eyes of the shadow creature, then to Elias, and a fierce, protective surge replaced the paralyzing fear. This was his mentor, his friend. He wouldn't abandon him. The warmth of the seed flared, responding to his defiance. It was a chaotic energy, still untamed by his will, but now, mixed with his protective instinct, it felt like a roaring furnace rather than a cold shiver. Caleb didn't know what to do, what spell to cast, but he instinctively reached out, hands outstretched, aiming at the encroaching darkness. He focused on the shadow, on its malice, and willed it away with every fiber of his being, drawing on the desperate, raw power that coursed through him. A blinding flash of raw, untamed light erupted from Caleb's outstretched hands, a brilliant, unfocused burst of pure energy. It wasn't the refined, gentle power he'd used to heal the bird or mend the sapling, this was raw, primal force, channeled by his desperate will to protect. The light slammed into the shadowy figure with a deafening crack that vibrated through the very foundations of the shed. The creature shrieked, a sound like 1,000 whispers dying at once, and recoiled violently, tearing itself away from the doorframe. The shed filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt air. For a moment, the shadow flickered, its form destabilized, but then it reformed, slightly diminished, but still powerfully menacing. Its red eyes, now glowing with a chilling mixture of hunger and something akin to reluctant respect, lingered on Caleb for a long, unsettling moment. Then, with a silent, deliberate turn, the inky form dissolved back into the deeper shadows of the garden, leaving behind only a lingering chill and the scent of decay. It was a retreat, not a defeat, a promise of a future confrontation. Chapter 9, The Academy and a Twisted Gift. Elias, though still holding his shimmering shield, swayed slightly, his face pale with exertion. The golden light around them flickered and then dissolved. "It recognizes your potential, Caleb," he rasped, his voice strained. "That was not its full might, but a probing strike. It will return, and this garden, as beloved as it is no longer a safe haven for you, nor for the magic that flourishes here. He looked around the damaged shed, his gaze filled with a quiet sorrow. The veil is thin, and the darkness seeks to exploit it. Caleb felt a profound exhaustion, the raw power having drained him more than any physical exertion. The seed in his backpack, though no longer throbbing painfully, was cold, as if dormant. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "There is only one place now," Elias said, his eyes now resolute. "A sanctuary of knowledge and training, far from here, nestled deep in the mountains where the old ley lines converge. The Arcane Academy of Whisperwind. It is where you must go, to learn to master this power, to understand the darkness you just faced, and to prepare for its inevitable return." The decision was made. Elias spent the next few days in a flurry of preparations, gathering ancient scrolls, packing strange herbs, and preparing for a long journey. Caleb, meanwhile, had a more difficult task, saying goodbye to the only home he had ever known, however broken it was. He approached his small, run-down house with a heavy heart. His parents were there, as they usually were, lost in their own world of blurred thoughts and slurred words. The house was dimly lit, smelling of stale air and something unidentifiable. His father grunted a response from the sofa, barely looking up from a flickering television screen. His mother, her eyes glazed, sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle beside her. "I'm leaving," Caleb said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the silence. "For a long time. I'm going away to a special school." He felt a strange detachment, a sadness not for what he was losing, but for what he had never truly had. His father simply waved a dismissive hand. But his mother, perhaps stirred by some long-buried maternal instinct or simply a brief lull in her haze, looked up. Her eyes, though unfocused, seemed to hold a flicker of something. "Leaving," she mumbled, her words thick. She fumbled beside her, her hand closing around a small, tarnished silver locket that lay on the table. It was old, intricately engraved with faded symbols. Caleb had never seen her wear it. "Here," she said, pushing it across the table towards him. "For luck. Always keep it close." Caleb hesitated. It was the first gift, the first gesture, she had ever truly given him that he could remember. He picked it up. It was cold and heavy in his palm. The faded symbol seemed to writhe faintly, almost imperceptibly, in the dim light, and a faint, almost imperceptible wrongness seemed to emanate from it, something too subtle for Caleb to identify, overshadowed by the sudden, overwhelming emotion of the moment. He slipped it into his pocket, a tiny spark of hope battling against a deeper, undefined unease. He thanked her, a quiet word that seemed to get lost in the empty space between them, and then, without another look back, he walked out the door for the last time. Chapter 10, New Friends, New Power. The journey to the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind was long and arduous, a winding path through ancient forests and over towering, mist-shrouded peaks. Days blurred into weeks as Elias, ever observant, taught Caleb about the natural world, pointing out the subtle energies in flowing water, the deep-rootedness of mountain pines, and the silent language of the wind. Caleb absorbed it all, sketching new patterns in his notebook, feeling the seed of the old magic hum softly against his back, a steady companion through the changing landscapes. The city, with its bullies and the cold dread of his old home, felt like a distant, fading dream. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the foot of the highest peak, shrouded in perpetual mist. As they ascended a narrow, winding path, the air grew thick with ancient magic. The mountain itself seemed to hum, a deep, resonant vibration that Caleb could feel in his bones. Hidden within a natural amphitheater of jagged, moss-covered stone, stood the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind. It wasn't a grand castle or a sprawling complex, but a series of gracefully carved stone buildings that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside, their roofs adorned with intricate runic symbols that pulsed with a faint, silvery light. Waterfalls cascaded down the rock faces, feeding crystal clear pools, and ancient trees, taller and more vibrant than any Caleb had ever seen, towered over everything. Students, older than Caleb, moved with quiet purpose between the buildings, some carrying glowing orbs, others tending to mystical plants, their movements imbued with a strange grace. As Elias led Caleb through the main gates, which opened silently at their approach, a sense of profound awe washed over him. This was it. This was where he would finally learn to understand the power that lived inside him. The air here was pure, invigorating, crackling with an energy that felt like home. They were met by an elegant woman with kind, piercing eyes and hair like spun moonlight, who introduced herself as Mistress Lyra, the Academy's head seeker of knowledge. She welcomed Elias like an old friend and gave Caleb a long, assessing look that seemed to see right through him, to the seed in his backpack and the tarnished locket in his pocket. "Welcome, young Caleb," she said, her voice like the gentle chime of bells. "Elias has spoken much of you. The mountain senses your arrival, and the old magic stirs with anticipation. Your journey of mastery truly begins now." Caleb felt a mix of nerves and overwhelming excitement. He was here. He was finally where he belonged. Life at the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind was unlike anything Caleb had ever known. The rigorous daily schedule was a stark contrast to his old, chaotic life. Each morning began with meditation classes, learning to quiet the mind and connect with the subtle energies of the mountain. Then came lessons in elemental manipulation, practical applications of magic, and extensive studies of ancient texts and magical theory. Elias remained his primary mentor, but he also learned from other specialized instructors, each a master in their own arcane discipline. Caleb, once dismissed as underperforming, discovered a natural aptitude for the old magic. His ability to listen to the natural world, honed in the botanical garden, gave him an intuitive edge. He excelled at coaxing life from barren soil, at guiding gentle breezes, and at purifying stagnant water. The seed of the old magic in his backpack, rather than merely thrumming, now seemed to sing with quiet power, responsive to his growing control. Yet, there were still moments when his power felt raw and untamed, especially when strong emotions flared. He often recalled Elias's warning about the destructive nature of anger, a lesson he found himself constantly revisiting. Despite the intensity of the training, Caleb wasn't alone. He soon found himself drawn to a small group of fellow students. There was Lyra, a quick-witted girl with fiery red hair and an uncanny knack for illusions, who often teased him about his quiet nature but fiercely defended him when others scoffed at his garden magic. Then there was Rorik, a stocky, good-natured boy with a booming laugh and an extraordinary talent for earth manipulation, who could shape stone and make crystals grow with a thought. They recognized something kindred in Caleb, a shared sense of being different, yet belonging here. They often studied together, practiced their spells in the sprawling courtyards, and explored the academy's hidden nooks and crannies. Caleb shared stories of his botanical garden, and in turn, they told him tales of their own journeys and the unique challenges they faced in mastering their gifts. For the first time, Caleb experienced the warmth of true friendship, a bond built on shared purpose and mutual respect. He still kept the silver locket from his mother tucked away, a cold, unsettling presence among his magical tools, but it was often forgotten in the camaraderie of his new friends and the exhilarating pursuit of knowledge. One afternoon, during a particularly challenging lesson on dispelling illusions, Lyra accidentally conjured a shimmering, but very solid, wall of light that trapped them in a practice chamber. While others panicked, Caleb, instinctively reaching for the subtle vibrations of magic, sensed the illusion's weak point. Focusing the seed's energy, he gently pushed, not to break, but to unravel the weave of Lyra's magic, causing the wall to shimmer and dissipate, freeing them all. His friends cheered, impressed by his unique approach to a problem. Chapter 11, The dark gift weeks turned into months, and Caleb's proficiency with the old magic grew exponentially. His understanding of energy flows became almost instinctual, and he could accomplish feats that still surprised his instructors. Elias often watched him with a knowing smile, a mixture of pride and a subtle, unreadable concern in his ancient eyes. Caleb found himself spending less time reflecting on his past and more time immersed in the Academy's vast libraries, practicing arcane disciplines, and enjoying the easy camaraderie with Lyra and Rorik. He felt truly whole, truly powerful, for the first time in his life. Yet, a part of him, the quiet, curious part that had led him to the hidden box in the first place, still yearned for deeper secrets. The Academy had many restricted areas, ancient chambers, and forgotten vaults that were strictly off-limits to students. Whispers circulated among the older students about a chamber, deep beneath the oldest wing, said to contain ancient, volatile magic relics of conflicts long past, perhaps even whispers of the very darkness Elias had warned him about. It was known as the Chamber of Whispers, and entry was forbidden under pain of severe magical consequence. One moonless night, a restless energy coursing through him, Caleb couldn't resist the allure any longer. While Lyra and Rorik slept soundly, he slipped out of his quarters, the seat of the old magic throbbing softly against his back, almost as if urging him on. He used the subtle energy manipulation Elias had taught him to bypass wards and silence creaking doors, moving like a phantom through the hushed halls. He found the entrance to the Chamber of Whispers a heavy, obsidian door etched with chilling, unfamiliar runes. A powerful ward hummed around it, but Caleb, drawing on a deeper, more forceful current of the seed, pushed past it with a surge of almost reckless power. The air on the other side was cold, ancient, and heavy with a stifling dread. The chamber was vast and echoing, lit by faint, unnatural luminescence from unseen sources. Strange artifacts lay shrouded in dust, and a low, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, resonating with a disturbing, resonant frequency. In the center, suspended within a shimmering field of dark energy, was a single, shimmering obsidian shard, pulsing with a cold, hungry light. It drew him in, an irresistible pull to its raw, potent power, utterly unlike the gentle warmth of his seed. Driven by an urge he couldn't name, Caleb reached out. As his fingertips brushed the obsidian, a searing cold ripped through him, followed by an agonizing, exhilarating rush. It was like drinking liquid night, a power that tasted of shadows and forgotten fury. He felt himself changing, expanding, absorbing something ancient and terrible. The obsidian shard crumbled to dust, its essence flowing into him, settling alongside the familiar warmth of his seed. He stumbled back, gasping, the new power swirling within him. It felt immense, raw, and instantly gratifying. He could feel the latent magical energies of the chamber now, not as gentle hums, but as roaring currents he could command. He tried a small, mental command, and a shadow detached itself from the wall, swirling obediently around his hand. This was different. This was more. It was power without effort, strength without compassion. But as the initial rush subsided, a subtle shift occurred within him. The seed of the old magic, usually a steady warmth, now felt colder, its familiar hum almost drowned out by the colder, sharper resonance of the dark magic. A faint, almost imperceptible film seemed to settle over his thoughts, a subtle darkening around the edges of his usual clarity. He felt stronger, yes, undeniably powerful, but also, different. Less empathetic. More impatient. He dismissed the thought, attributing it to the shock of the new power. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could not tell Elias about this. Or Lyra. Or Rorik. This was his secret, a hidden advantage in a world that still felt dangerous. He carefully sealed the Chamber of Whispers behind him, the dark magic now swirling within him, a potent, corrupting secret he was determined to keep. Chapter 12, Kalen's blackmail. Caleb's hidden power was a dangerous, exhilarating secret. The dark magic coursed through him, a stark contrast to the gentle flow of the old magic Elias taught. In his regular lessons, Caleb seemed to master new concepts with uncanny speed, his control over elements and energies becoming sharper, more effortless. When a particularly stubborn magical knot resisted his classmates' efforts, Caleb often found a new, subtle way to unravel it, unknowingly tapping into the obsidian shard's raw force to push through where others faltered. He was getting stronger, undeniably, but the quiet hum of his seed of the old magic felt increasingly muffled, a constant, dull ache beneath the thrilling surge of his new, darker abilities. He was also becoming more irritable, a low simmer of impatience always just beneath the surface, especially when his friends, Lyra and Rorik, seemed slower to grasp a concept. He'd quickly mask it, but the effort was draining. The Academy's training sessions often involved mock duels or problem-solving exercises. One afternoon, during a particularly challenging session on manipulating light and shadow, Caleb was paired with Kalen. Kalen wasn't a bully like Liam, but he was competitive and arrogant, with a sharp tongue and a deep-seated resentment for Caleb's rapid progress. He saw Caleb as an undeserving, quiet boy who had stumbled into power, unlike himself, who had meticulously studied and worked for every inch of his magical prowess. Their task was to navigate a shifting maze of magically conjured shadows, using light to dispel them. Kalen struggled, his light spells flickering erratically. Caleb, impatient with Kalen's floundering, felt the familiar surge of the darker power. Without thinking, he instinctively reached for a deeper, colder well of energy within him. A shadow, darker than anything cast by the setting sun, detached itself from his hand and snaked through the maze, not dispelling the other shadows, but devouring them, leaving behind a chilling void. The oppressive gloom it created was far beyond the scope of the exercise, and the air in the training room grew unnaturally cold. Kalen froze, his eyes wide. He didn't understand the old magic, but he understood raw power, and this was something entirely alien to the Academy's teachings. The shadows Caleb commanded were not just absences of light, they felt like a living, malevolent force. When Caleb quickly reabsorbed the shadow back into himself, the room's normal light returned, but Kalen's gaze remained fixed on him, a shrewd, calculating look replacing his usual sneer. He saw the subtle ripple of darker energy that clung to Caleb for a fraction of a second too long, saw the faint, almost imperceptible shift in Caleb's eyes. No one else noticed. The instructor was distracted with another struggling group, and Lyra and Rorik were too focused on their own challenges. But Kalen had seen it. Later that evening, Kalen cornered Caleb in a secluded alcove in the library. "So, the quiet garden boy has a little secret, doesn't he?" Kalen's voice was a low, venomous whisper. "That wasn't the old magic you were playing with today. That was something else. Something dark." Caleb's heart hammered. He felt exposed, vulnerable, the terrifying reality of his secret being discovered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, but a tremor betrayed him. Kalen smiled, a cold, predatory glint in his eyes. "Oh, I think you do. And I think the esteemed Elias, and Mistress Lyra, and all your dear little friends would be very interested to hear about where you got that particular gift. Or rather, how you're twisting the Academy's noble magic into something foul." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a chilling murmur. "Unless, of course, you'd be willing to do a small favor for me. Something that requires a touch of that unique talent of yours. Something that would remain our little secret. What do you want?" Caleb choked out, the words tasting like ash. Kalen chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Simple. There's a student in advanced enchanting, a senior named Serafina. She's been far too gifted lately. Always outshining me, always getting the best assignments. Next week is the final enchanting examination. I want her performance severely impacted." Caleb stared, bewildered. "Impacted? How?" "I want you to subtly corrupt her focus charm," Kalen explained, his voice laced with malicious satisfaction. She uses a small, enchanted focus charm, a quartz pendant, to aid her concentration during complex spell work. During the exam, she'll rely on it. I want you to infuse it with just enough chaos, enough subtle discord, using your shadowy touch. Not enough to obviously break it, no, that would be too simple. Just enough to cause her spells to falter, to make her mind swim, to make her doubt herself. Enough that she fails, spectacularly. Enough that I rise above her. A wave of nausea washed over Caleb. This wasn't healing. This wasn't even simple destruction. This was insidious, a deliberate twisting of a fellow student's talent, a psychological torment. It went against everything Elias had taught him about balance and harmony. He felt the cold, sharp edge of the dark magic rising within him, offering a simple solution, an easy path to make Kalen disappear. But Elias's warning about anger consuming him echoed, and a fresh wave of fear, a fear of what he might become, momentarily overwhelmed the dark magic's allure. No, Caleb whispered, shaking his head. I can't. That's wrong. Kalen's smile vanished, replaced by a sneer. Oh, you can, Caleb. And you will. Unless you want everyone to know what kind of abomination you've truly become. A dark magician hiding in a healing academy. How do you think Elias would react? Or your precious friends? Think about it, Caleb. You do this one thing for me, and your secret is safe. Refuse, and your life here, everything you've built, comes crashing down around you. The choice is yours. The silence in the alcove was suffocating, broken only by the frantic beat of Caleb's own heart. He looked at Kalen's cold, triumphant face, then felt the chilling pressure of the locket in his pocket, almost as if it approved of Kalen's dark proposition. He was trapped. Chapter 13, The Corrupted Charm. Fine, Caleb finally rasped, the word tasting bitter. I'll do it. But if you ever try this again. Kalen simply smirked, a look of chilling satisfaction. Just ensure Seraphina's pendant is properly tuned. The next few days were a torment for Caleb. He watched Seraphina, a kind, dedicated student, with a growing knot of dread in his stomach. The thought of deliberately sabotaging her, of twisting his newfound abilities for such a petty, cruel purpose, made him sick. Yet, Kalen's veiled threats hung over him like a storm cloud, constantly reminding him of the terrible secret he carried. The seat of the old magic felt sluggish, muted, as if recoiling from the task, while the colder, sharper energy of the dark magic pulsed, ready and eager. The opportunity came on the eve of the enchanting exam. Students were allowed to leave their focus charms in a designated warding room overnight to charge with ambient magical energy, ensuring peak performance. It was a common practice, deemed secure. But Caleb knew the subtle flaws in the academy's older wards, knowledge he'd gleaned from Elias's lessons, now combined with the insidious insights granted by his darker power. Under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, Caleb slipped into the warding room. The air hummed with dozens of minor enchantments, creating a soft, warm glow. Seraphina's quartz pendant lay on a small, velvet cushion, shimmering faintly. Caleb's hand trembled as he reached for it. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to reveal his secret and face the consequences. But then he pictured Kalen's smug face, the whispers, the inevitable ostracism. And the dark magic within him flared, pushing down the resistance, offering a quick, decisive path. He focused, not on the pendant itself, but on the delicate weave of enchantment within it. He drew upon the cold, insidious power, visualizing subtle discord, a dissonance that would unravel Seraphina's concentration without outwardly breaking the charm. As he poured the corrupting energy into the pendant, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor passed through the room. One of the ambient light globes above them flickered erratically, then dimmed to a faint glow. A nearby warding crystal on a pedestal flared a brilliant, Warning read for a split second, emitting a soft, resonant hum, far too loud for the subtlety Caleb intended. Caleb froze, his blood running cold. He snatched his hand back, quickly reabsorbing the shadow energy, stuffing the pendant back onto its cushion. He spun around, heart pounding, convinced he'd been caught. He scanned the room, his enhanced senses straining for any sign of an alarm or approaching footsteps. The light globe stabilized, and the warding crystal returned to its normal, soft pulse. The room hummed on, undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. The academy remained silent, asleep. He had been so close to exposure, to having his darkest secret laid bare. He hurried out of the room, using the old magic to carefully reseal the wards behind him. As he walked back through the quiet halls, a profound sense of emptiness settled over him. He had succeeded, but at what cost? The seed of the old magic in his backpack now felt distinctly cold, a dull, heavy weight, and in its place, the dark power hummed with a quiet, satisfied purr, subtly twisting the edges of his mind, making the unsettling act he'd just committed feel almost necessary. Chapter 14, Suspicions and the Attempted Cure. The day of the final enchanting examination dawned, crisp and clear, but for Caleb, it was shrouded in a cloud of dread and a chilling anticipation. He watched Serafina enter the examination hall, her usually confident stride a little lighter, her focus pendant gleaming faintly at her neck. A knot tightened in Caleb's stomach. Hours later, the results were posted. A wave of murmuring swept through the student body. Serafina, the bright star of advanced enchanting, had not merely underperformed, her final project, an intricate protective ward, had inexplicably collapsed mid-demonstration, a catastrophic failure. Her score was shockingly low, placing her far down the list. Kalen, meanwhile, had performed flawlessly, his own enchantment a display of precision and power, earning him top marks and the coveted lead spot in the next level apprenticeship program. He cast a triumphant, knowing glance at Caleb across the crowded hall, a smirk playing on his lips, a silent, chilling affirmation of their shared secret. A bitter taste filled Caleb's mouth. He felt no satisfaction, only a profound emptiness. He had helped Kalen ascend, but in doing so, he had pushed Serafina down, and worse, compromised his own burgeoning magical ethics. The seed of the old magic felt colder, heavier in his backpack now, as if weighed down by his deceit. The darker power, however, hummed with a quiet satisfaction, subtly reshaping his internal landscape. He found himself less bothered by the injustice, more preoccupied with the feeling of power that had allowed him to achieve Kalen's demand. The guilt was still there, but it was muffled, distant. For the next few months, life at the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind settled into a new, uneasy rhythm for Caleb. Kalen, now basking in his elevated status, left Caleb alone, confident that his secret was safe. Serafina, devastated by her failure, grew withdrawn, her vibrant spirit seemingly dimmed. Caleb avoided her gaze, unable to face the consequences of his actions. Elias continued his lessons, seemingly oblivious to the subtle corruption taking root within his apprentice. He spoke of the mountain's wisdom, the purity of intention, and the intricate dance of light and shadow, concepts that Caleb now heard through a subtly distorted filter. Caleb continued to excel in his studies. The darker magic made certain complex spells easier, providing shortcuts and raw power where the old magic demanded patience and deep connection. He mastered illusions with Lyra, his shadows becoming unervingly real. He delved into earth magic with Rorik, his ability to manipulate stone unnaturally precise. His friends, Lyra and Rorik, noticed his increased power, attributing it to his unique connection with the seed and Elias's tutelage. They were impressed, even a little envious, but they were too loyal to question him deeply. He kept the secret locked away, a cold, growing weight, feeling increasingly isolated even amidst the camaraderie. The silver locket, his mother's gift, remained a constant, subtle chill against his skin, sometimes seeming to vibrate faintly in sync with the colder power. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. The shadow creature hadn't returned, Kalen's blackmail was silent, and his friends admired his progress. Yet, deep down, Caleb felt a growing unease. The purity of the seed of the old magic was subtly fading, its warmth dimming. The vibrant colors of his sketches seemed muted, the intricate patterns he once drew now felt more rigid, less fluid. The quiet peace he once found in the garden was becoming harder to access, replaced by a restless energy, a constant craving for more power. He was becoming stronger, yes, but he was also becoming something he no longer recognized. One evening, while training alone in a secluded practice chamber deep within the Academy's caverns, Caleb was attempting a complex illusion spell that required immense focus and a delicate balance of light and shadow. Normally, this was a discipline Lyra excelled at, but Caleb found his shadows now held an unnerving tangibility, their edges sharper, almost predatory. As he concentrated, pushing his limits, a sudden, blinding headache split his skull. The room spun, and for a terrifying moment, the shadows he was weaving seemed to detach from his will, swirling with a malevolent intelligence of their own. They writhed, coiling inward, threatening to crush him with their oppressive weight. Panic flared. The seed of the old magic pulsed weakly, a desperate flutter against the overwhelming, cold roar of the dark power that now threatened to consume him. He saw distorted images flash before his eyes, Seraphina's devastated face, Liam's sneer, even glimpses of his parents' blurred faces, all tinged with a deeper, unsettling darkness. The room grew impossibly cold, and Caleb found himself struggling to breathe, caught in a swirling vortex of uncontrolled dark magic. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, fighting for control. The power was too much, too untamed, too hungry. He was losing himself to it. Just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, a voice, sharp with concern, cut through the oppressive chill. "Caleb! What in the blazes are you doing?" It was Rorik, who had come looking for him after dinner. He stood frozen in the doorway, his usual good-natured expression replaced by wide-eyed horror. The shadows in the chamber, still swirling out of Caleb's control, seemed to react to Rorik's presence, coiling more tightly, threatening to lash out. Rorik, a master of earth magic, instinctively slammed a hand to the ground, and a small, hastily conjured stone barrier erupted between himself and the chaotic shadows. He hadn't seen the specific nature of Caleb's power, only its terrifying, uncontrolled magnitude and darkness. With a final, desperate surge of will, Caleb forced the wild energies back, reining them in with a desperate gasp. The shadows receded, flickering back to normal, leaving the chamber cold but stable. The headache slowly subsided, leaving him weak and trembling. Rorik stared at him, his expression a mixture of shock and profound unease. He hadn't seen the source of the power, but he had certainly witnessed its terrifying effects and instability. The secret, while not fully revealed, was dangerously close to exposure. Rorik took a step back, his brow furrowed, a flicker of something akin to hurt replacing the fear in his eyes. "Caleb, I know magic. I felt raw elemental power, but that felt like it was trying to drain the air itself. Like it was hungry." He looked at Caleb with a new, critical gaze, seeing not just his friend, but something unsettling beneath the surface. "You've been different lately. So much stronger, but quieter. And sometimes, you look like you're carrying a great weight." Caleb flinched, the subtle changes Rorik was pointing out hitting him like a physical blow. The growing irritability, the detachment, the subtle corruption he had tried to ignore. It was showing. "Please, Rorik," Caleb pleaded, his voice thick with unsaid things. He couldn't confess. Not now. Not when everything hung in the balance. He imagined Elias's grim face, the shame of Seraphina's ruin, the absolute destruction of his new life. "You have to believe me. It was just a mistake. An uncontrolled burst. I'll be more careful, I promise. He reached out, a desperate gesture. Rorik held up a hand, stopping him. His gaze was still filled with concern, but it was now tinged with a deep, unsettling suspicion. He looked at Caleb's trembling hands, then at the lingering chill in the air, then back at Caleb's pleading, haunted eyes. He was loyal, yes, but he wasn't blind. I won't tell anyone, Caleb, Rorik finally said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. Not if you say it was just a mistake. He paused, his eyes searching Caleb's. But you need to be careful. You need to tell Elias if something is wrong. That wasn't like anything I've ever seen from the old magic. He turned, the silence in the chamber suddenly vast and cold. Without another word, Rorik left, his footsteps echoing down the stone corridor, leaving Caleb alone in the chilling aftermath. Caleb sank back to the floor, leaning against the cold stone wall, the seat of the old magic now almost completely silent, overshadowed by the cold, triumphant hum of the darker power. He had kept his secret, for now. But the cost was clear, the first crack had appeared in the foundation of his most cherished friendship. Rorik hadn't betrayed him, but he no longer looked at him the same way. The path Caleb walked was becoming increasingly solitary, and increasingly dangerous. The very next morning, Caleb made his way to Elias's study. The wizard sat by a low, crackling fire, poring over an ancient, glowing scroll. He looked up as Caleb entered, his usual serene expression replaced by a look of immediate concern as he saw the tremor in Caleb's hands, the haunted look in his eyes. Caleb, what troubles you so deeply, my boy? Elias asked, gently setting aside his scroll. Caleb hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He described the incident in the practice chamber, the blinding headache, the shadows turning on him, the terrifying cold, and the feeling of losing control. He painted a vivid picture of the sheer, raw power that had burst forth, emphasizing its destructive and alien nature, far beyond anything the old magic was meant to be. It felt different, Master Elias, Caleb confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Not like the power I used to heal the bird, or even repel that creature. It was colder, hungrier. It almost consumed me. And Rorik, he saw it. He knows something is wrong, even if he doesn't understand what. Elias listened intently, his gaze piercing. He stood and walked over to Caleb, placing a hand on his shoulder. This is grave, Caleb. That sounds very much like the kind of chaotic energy the shadow entity wields. Perhaps your earlier confrontation with it, though brief, left a lingering resonance within you, a seed of its own corrupting power that has now found fertile ground. Caleb flinched internally, a desperate relief washing over him at Elias's interpretation. It wasn't entirely a lie, the shadow creature had undoubtedly played a role. It was just a convenient omission of how that seed had truly taken root. Yes, Master, Caleb quickly agreed, latching onto the explanation. It must be. It felt like a piece of that darkness clung to me. He carefully kept any mention of the forbidden chamber or the obsidian shard locked away in the deepest recesses of his mind. Elias stroked his beard thoughtfully. This is not something we can ignore. Such energies, if left untamed, will not only corrupt your magic but your very spirit. It will twist your intent, turn your light to shadow. We must act quickly to purge this influence, or at least bring it into balance with the old magic. He looked at Caleb, his eyes holding a profound seriousness. It will be difficult, young one. It will require a journey deep within yourself, and a confrontation with the darkness that now tries to claim you. But we will face it together. Caleb felt a surge of relief that Elias hadn't pressed further, hadn't suspected the true origin. But beneath that relief lay a gnawing guilt. He was being dishonest with the one person who trusted him implicitly. and as Elias began to outline a series of ancient rituals and meditations to cleanse and rebalance his connection to the old magic, Caleb couldn't shake the chilling realization that he was seeking a cure for a wound he himself had deliberately inflicted, and doing so under a veil of deceit. The silver locket, heavy in his pocket, felt colder than ever. Chapter 15, A Temporary Peace. Elias wasted no time. For the next several weeks, Caleb's training shifted dramatically. Gone were the lessons on elemental control and illusion weaving. Instead, Elias guided him through a series of increasingly rigorous cleansing rituals and deep meditations. They spent hours in the Academy's ancient grotto, where subterranean springs fed luminous mosses, or in silent, candlelit chambers where Elias burned rare, fragrant herbs. The goal, Elias explained, was to reattune Caleb's inner magical channels, to strengthen the seed of the old magic and help it naturally purge any lingering dark energies that had latched onto him from the shadow creature. Caleb diligently followed every instruction. He focused with an intensity he hadn't known he possessed, pushing down the rebellious whispers of the dark magic within him. During the rituals, he'd feel Elias's calming, pure old magic flowing into him, warm and vibrant, battling against the cold, inert weight of the corrupting power. There were moments of profound discomfort, moments when his mind felt like a battlefield, but there were also fleeting glimpses of the serene clarity he'd once felt in the botanical garden. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, Caleb began to feel better. The constant, restless craving for more power subsided. The subtle darkening around the edges of his thoughts, the growing impatience, seemed to recede. The seed of the old magic in his backpack, once cold and muted, began to regain some of its warmth, its familiar hum, a welcome presence after weeks of silence. He could sketch with his old fluidity again, the vibrant colors returning to his mental palette. The crushing guilt over Seraphina's failure, though still present, felt more manageable, less like a consuming fire and more like a distant, aching memory. Elias watched Caleb's progress with satisfaction. "You are strong, Caleb," he declared one evening, observing Caleb's tranquil expression after a particularly potent meditation. "The old magic truly has found a resilient home within you. We have purified the lingering darkness. Keep this practice, keep your heart aligned with harmony, and you will prevent any further corrupting influences from taking root." Caleb nodded, feeling a genuine sense of relief. He felt lighter, clearer. The raw, cold power was still there, dormant beneath the reawakened old magic, but it seemed to be contained, pushed back into a corner of his being. He had successfully hidden its true origin from Elias, and the immediate threat of exposure, both to Elias and to the darkness itself, seemed to have passed. He resumed his normal lessons, and the easy camaraderie with Lyra and Rorik slowly began to mend. Rorik still looked at him differently sometimes, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but Caleb's renewed focus and seemingly balanced demeanor slowly chipped away at his friend's unease. Everything was, seemingly, back on track. But Caleb knew. He could feel it, a subtle discord beneath the surface of his purified state. The dark magic hadn't been removed, it had merely been suppressed. Like a predator biding its time, it lay dormant, waiting. The silver locket in his pocket, forgotten during the cleansing rituals, felt colder and heavier than ever now, emitting a faint, almost imperceptible thrum that resonated with the lurking shadow within him. It was a temporary peace, a fragile truce in a war he knew was far from over. Chapter 16, The Academy under siege for months. An uneasy peace settled over Caleb's life at the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind. The cleansing rituals with Elias had been effective, if temporary. The warm, comforting hum of the seed of the old magic had largely returned, and the insidious chill of the dark power was confined, a dormant viper in a distant corner of his being. He excelled in his studies, his skills growing sharper, his friendships with Lyra and Rorik deepening, though Rorik still occasionally held a hesitant, searching look in his eyes. The silver locket, a constant, unsettling weight, remained his only tangible reminder of the deceit he carried. He allowed himself to believe, for a time, that he had truly mastered the darkness, that his secret was safe, and that his life was finally, irrevocably, on the right path. But deep in the mountains, ancient ley lines stirred. And far away, in the forgotten corners of the city's botanical garden, the shadows writhed, remembering the sudden, potent burst of light that had repelled them. The entity that had attacked Elias's shed, sensing Caleb's growing power, had not forgotten. It had merely bided its time, subtly weaving its influence across the land, slowly gathering strength, inexorably drawn to the source of the old magic and the nascent dark power now residing within Caleb. One frigid winter night, a powerful blizzard descended upon the mountains, trapping the academy in a swirling vortex of snow and ice. The usual magical wards, designed to deflect such storms, strained and groaned under an unnatural pressure. Inside the academy, the air grew thick with a sudden, profound cold that seeped into bones, far beyond the chill of the blizzard. Candles flickered wildly, magical lights dimmed, and the ancient stones of the academy itself seemed to moan. A low, guttural growl, deeper and more resonant than any mountain wind, echoed from the very foundations of the school. Elias, alerted by the sudden magical disturbance, strode through the halls, his face grim. Other senior mages moved with frantic urgency, their spells struggling to stabilize the academy's defenses. Panic began to ripple through the student body as the cold intensified, and shadows, unnaturally dark and deep, detached themselves from corners, stretching and twisting into vaguely menacing forms. These weren't just the absence of light, they pulsed with a malevolent sentience. Caleb felt it first, a sickening lurch in his gut. The seed of the old magic recoiled within him, a terrified flutter. But the dormant dark power, the one he had tried to suppress, flared awake with a triumphant roar, surging through his veins, connecting with the encroaching shadows. His head throbbed, a familiar, agonizing pain. He saw Lyra and Rorik, their faces pale with fear, trying to cast light spells that barely glimmered in the oppressive gloom. The low, guttural growl vibrated through the very foundations of the school, escalating into a terrifying roar. The arcane wards, once a symbol of impenetrable protection, fractured with visible cracks, shimmering lines of energy breaking like fragile glass. Outside, the blizzard intensified, but the cold seeping through the academy walls was unnatural, a deeper chill that brought with it the stench of decay and fear. Shadows, unnaturally dark and deep, detached themselves from every corner, every alcove, stretching and twisting into vaguely menacing forms that writhed with malevolent sentience. They were no longer mere absences of light, they were extensions of the entity itself, reaching, grasping, corrupting the very essence of the school. "It's here." Elias's voice, usually so calm, was strained with urgency, his staff glowing fiercely as he tried to shore up a cracking archway. "The shadow of the veil. It's drawn by the convergence of the ley lines and the burgeoning power within you, Caleb." Panic erupted. Students screamed, spells misfired, and the chaotic energy only seemed to feed the growing darkness. The shadows coalesced, forming crude, terrifying figures that flowed like liquid night, pressing in from all sides. A surge of them slammed into a group of younger students, who cried out as the cold consumed them, leaving them shivering and unresponsive, their eyes wide and vacant. The academy's ancient, revered halls were rapidly falling under a chilling, pervasive darkness, and Caleb knew, with a sickening certainty, that he was the reason why. He felt the dark power within him trying to merge with the invading shadows, to embrace their cold embrace. It was tempting, promising absolute control, a terrifying strength that could push them all back. But then he saw Lyra struggling, her illusion spells barely holding against a creeping tendril of darkness, and Rorik, frantically trying to raise a stone barrier that was crumbling as quickly as he built it. He saw the sheer terror in their eyes, and a different kind of surge, a desperate, protective defiance, warred with the consuming darkness inside him. Master Elias! Caleb shouted, his voice cracking, as the wizard was forced back by a surge of shadows, his staff barely holding them at bay. What do we do? Elias glanced at Caleb, his face etched with grim determination. We can't fight it directly, not here. It's too strong, and it feeds on the very essence of this place now. We must activate the emergency ward of dispersion. It will buy us time to escape, but someone needs to reach the central nexus in the Grand Hall. He pointed towards the heart of the academy, where the largest concentration of shadows seemed to be gathering. It requires a focused burst of pure, old magic. A concentrated surge to overload its anchor points. Caleb felt the warring powers within him. The dark magic urged him to embrace the shadows, to fight fire with shadow. But the faint, desperate flicker of the seed of the old magic reminded him of Elias's words, "Your gift is for healing, for balance." This was not about personal power, it was about saving his friends, saving the academy. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that using his darker power here would only fuel the entity, and potentially corrupt the very wards Elias sought to activate. Chapter 17, The Emergency Ward and the Exposed Truth. "I'll do it," he yelled over the rising cacophony of shrieks and crumbling stone. He looked at Lyra and Rorik, their faces etched with fear but their eyes holding unwavering trust. "Cover me. Go, Caleb." Rorik roared, slamming his fists to the ground, causing jagged stone spires to erupt, momentarily pinning a few of the shadowy figures. "Be safe," Lyra shouted, weaving a shimmering curtain of illusory light to distract a surge of darkness that coalesced into a monstrous form. Clutching his backpack, the seed of the old magic fluttering a desperate plea, Caleb broke away, sprinting through the chaotic, shadow-choked halls towards the Grand Hall. The journey was a terrifying gauntlet. Shadows lunged, their icy tendrils reaching, trying to pull him down, to drain his warmth. He instinctively dodged, rolled, and sometimes, with a desperate surge of the purest old magic he could muster, unleashed a burst of golden light that momentarily vaporized the lesser shadows, opening a path. But the effort was immense, and with each use of the old magic, he felt the darker power within him seething, impatiently, contemptuously. As he neared the Grand Hall, the oppressive darkness intensified. The air grew impossibly cold, and the very ground seemed to thrum with a malevolent presence. He pushed open the heavy, ornate doors, revealing a scene of utter corruption. The vast hall, usually bathed in the soft glow of enchanted lanterns, was a churning vortex of living shadow. In the very center, where a magnificent crystal orb usually resided, the shadow entity itself had coalesced, a towering, amorphous pillar of inky black, its twin red eyes blazing like infernos. It was feeding, drawing the magic from the academy's core, growing stronger with every passing second. As Caleb took a step onto the marble floor, the entity's red eyes snapped to him. A voice, ancient and insidious, filled his mind, a whisper that seemed to echo from the deepest corners of his soul. "You. The boy with the echo. You carry my kin. Why do you resist, little light? Join us. Embrace the true power. The old magic is weak, fleeting. It serves only to heal that which is meant to decay. We offer strength. We offer control. Your anger, your hurt, your fear, they are gifts. Unleash them. Turn this academy to shadow, just as you brought darkness to that other's mind." Caleb gasped, a profound shock ripping through him. The locket. Even severed, it had created a resonance, a lingering trail the shadow had exploited to follow him, to breach even the Guardian's defenses. The ultimate betrayal. The heart of the forgotten star pulsed frantically, recoiling slightly from the encroaching darkness. The Guardian's voices cried out warnings, but they seemed unable to directly intervene in this final, personal conflict. This was Caleb's fight, a direct consequence of his past choices. He stumbled, clutching his head. "No," he gasped aloud, his voice raw. He squeezed his eyes shut, picturing Elias's gentle smile, Rorik's genuine fear, Lyra's desperate courage. He remembered the healed bird, the blossoming sapling, the quiet peace of the garden. He remembered Elias's words, magic born of anger consumes the wielder. Your gift is for healing, for balance. This entity offered power, yes, but it offered a power that would annihilate, that would devour everything he held dear. It wasn't control, it was submission to its own corrupting will. With a monumental effort, Caleb forced the wild energies back, reining them in with a desperate gasp. He stumbled forward, driven by sheer will, reaching the central nexus, a large, unadorned stone pedestal, pulsating faintly. Placing both hands on it, Caleb closed his eyes again, ignoring the shadow's furious mental whispers, the pain in his head. He poured every ounce of his uncorrupted will into the pedestal, channeling the purest, strongest stream of old magic he had ever commanded. He focused on dispersion, on repelling, on light. A blinding, golden-white pillar of pure old magic erupted from the pedestal, tearing through the churning darkness in the grand hall. It wasn't the raw, destructive burst he'd unleashed before, but a focused, cleansing wave of light and energy that radiated outwards, pushing back the encroaching shadows. The entity shrieked, a sound of pure agony, its towering form recoiling violently. The pervasive cold lessened, and the corrupting shadows that clung to the academy walls withered and vanished, like mist in the sun. The ancient stones of the academy pulsed with renewed life, shaking off the oppressive darkness. The emergency ward of dispersion was activated. Caleb collapsed, utterly drained, the world spinning around him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the shadow entity, diminished but not destroyed, dissolving back into the blizzard outside the now restored outer wards, its red eyes blazing with an unfathomable rage and a chilling promise of vengeance. He had saved them, but at what personal cost? He woke to the soft, rhythmic hum of the old magic and the scent of Elias's healing herbs. He was in the academy's infirmary, the warm light of a recuperation spell glowing above him. Lyra sat by his bedside, her fiery hair a bright contrast to the pale bandages on her arm, a result of the struggle. Rorik stood nearby, his face still etched with concern, but a new admiration in his eyes. Elias stood at the foot of the bed, his ancient face relieved. "Caleb, my boy," Elias said, his voice filled with profound relief. "You did it. You activated the emergency ward. You pushed it back. It was a feat of immense courage and pure intent. You saved us all." Lyra reached out and squeezed his hand, a tear tracking down her cheek. "I thought we were done for. The shadows were everywhere, freezing everything. Then that light, it was incredible, Caleb." Rorik nodded solemnly. "Yeah. It was like the mountain itself took a breath and shoved the darkness away. You're truly powerful, Caleb." A wave of warmth, of genuine affection and pride, washed over Caleb. He had done something good, something truly powerful. The burden of his secret, the coldness of the dark magic, felt momentarily distant, overshadowed by the relief and the genuine gratitude of his friends. This was what old magic was for: to protect, to save, to bring light. Chapter 18, The Judgment and the Quest revealed. Just as the quiet relief began to settle, the infirmary door burst open. Kalen stood there, his face pale and drawn from the attack, but his eyes burning with a mixture of fear and furious resentment. He had seen Caleb's display of power, the raw force that had erupted, and it terrified him. He couldn't let Caleb take all the credit, not when Caleb held a secret that could ruin him. He strode into the room, ignoring Elias's stern gaze. "Saved us?" Kalen scoffed, his voice sharp and accusatory, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere. "He almost destroyed us. You fool. You don't know what he's done. You don't know what he is." Lyra and Rorik looked at Kalen, bewildered. Elias's expression hardened. "Kalen, this is neither the time nor the place for such baseless accusations. Caleb performed a heroic act. Heroic? Callan sneered, his gaze fixed on Caleb, ignoring everyone else. He used dark magic. That surge of power, that cold light, it wasn't the old magic, Elias. It was the same twisted power that made Seraphina fail. He went into the Chamber of Whispers. He took forbidden magic. He embraced the darkness, and he brought that shadow creature here. This academy was safe until he came along with his corrupted power. A chilling silence descended upon the infirmary. Lyra's hand slipped from Caleb's, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. Rorik took a step back, his face paling even further, remembering the uncontrolled shadows in the training chamber. Elias's eyes, usually so kind, sharpened, fixing on Caleb with a piercing intensity, a profound disappointment already beginning to form. He looked from Callan's furious, accusing face to Caleb's pale, exposed one, the truth, or at least a terrible part of it, laid bare. The silver locket, forgotten in Caleb's pocket, felt heavy and cold, its whispered wrongness finally resonating with the chilling accusation in the air. Caleb felt a profound despair, cold and heavy, settling over him. There was no denying his own actions. Callan, with his vindictive precision, had exposed the wound Caleb had desperately tried to hide. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could disappear, wish he could rewind time. Caleb, Elias said, his voice quiet, but laced with an undeniable sorrow that cut deeper than any shout. Is this true? Did you enter the Chamber of Whispers? The question hung in the air, heavy with betrayed trust. Caleb opened his eyes. He saw the hurt in Lyra's face, the confirmation of Rorik's worst fears, and Elias's profound disappointment. The urge to lie, to deny, was strong, but the words wouldn't come. The very air around him felt heavy with the truth he had tried to bury. He could only manage a slow, agonizing nod. A collective gasp rippled through the few other students and healers in the infirmary, quickly turning into murmurs of shock and fear. The Chamber of Whispers was a place of legend, a forbidden, dangerous vault. Lyra, her face pale, stared at him. The chamber? Caleb, what? And the shadows, was that what you used against Seraphina? Her voice cracked, riddled with betrayal. Rorik, his face grim, finally spoke, his voice low and strained. That's why you acted so strange after that training session. That's what you were hiding. The weight of their disappointment was crushing, but as Caleb looked at Callan's triumphant smirk, a fresh wave of defiant anger surged through him. He was ruined, yes, but he wouldn't go down alone. The cold whisper of the dark magic, typically urging him towards self-preservation, now subtly pushed him to lash out, to inflict justice, however twisted. Yes. Caleb's voice, though hoarse, suddenly rang with a desperate clarity. Yes, I went into the chamber. And yes, I used dark magic. He looked directly at Callan, a burning accusation in his eyes. But I used it because he made me. He saw what I could do and he blackmailed me. He made me corrupt Seraphina's focus charm so he could win the enchanting exam. Callan's triumphant sneer instantly dissolved, replaced by a mask of shock and indignant fury. He's lying. Elias, he's just trying to deflect. He made me taint her pendant. Caleb insisted, cutting him off, the raw emotion pouring out. He threatened to expose me if I didn't. He's just as guilty. He used my secret for his own selfish gain. The silence that followed was even more profound than before, thick with disbelief. Lyra and Rorik exchanged stunned glances, their expressions shifting from betrayal towards Caleb to dawning confusion and suspicion towards Callan. Elias's gaze, which had been fixed solely on Caleb, now swiveled to Callan, sharp and penetrating. He saw the panic in Callan's eyes, the way he stammered, the way he couldn't hold Elias's gaze. Is this true, Callan? Elias's voice was dangerously quiet, resonating with a power that chilled the air more effectively than any shadow. Kalen stammered, unable to form a coherent defense. Elias raised a hand, silencing Kalen with a stern gaze that carried the weight of ages. He turned back to Caleb, his expression complex, a mixture of pain, regret, and something that looked like immense, heavy responsibility. "The Chamber of Whispers is guarded for a reason, Caleb," Elias stated, his voice now firm, echoing with authority. "Its contents are not for the untrained or the undisciplined. To seek such power, it comes with a terrible price, one that can corrupt not just your magic, but your very soul. And to bring that darkness here, to the heart of the Academy, it is an act of grave consequence." He then turned his steely gaze towards Kalen. "And to exploit such a secret, to use it to corrupt another's magic and your own spirit for personal gain, Kalen, is equally abhorrent. Both matters are too serious for the infirmary." He looked at the other healers and students who had gathered, their faces ranging from fear to outrage. "Caleb, you are to be confined to the highest tower. Kalen, you are to be confined to your quarters, under immediate magical restraint. We will hold a council of the Academy Masters, and both of you will answer for your actions." Elias's voice was filled with a sad finality, a sentence already passed for Caleb, and a grim promise of judgment for Kalen. Caleb felt his world crumble. His sanctuary, his purpose, his friends all lost. The warmth of the seed of the old magic was now completely gone, overshadowed by a cold, heavy dread. The silver locket in his pocket pulsed with a faint, malevolent satisfaction, a tiny, internal victory in his complete ruin. He had faced down an invading shadow, but he had been utterly defeated by the darkness within himself, exposed by the very ambition he had tried to hide, dragging Kalen down with him into the abyss of revelation. He was alone again, truly alone, this time by his own hand, with the bitter taste of truth on his tongue. Chapter 19, Banishment and a New Guide. The highest tower, where Caleb was confined, offered a panoramic view of the storm-lashed mountains, but he saw little of it. The wind howled like a mournful spirit around the ancient stone, and the biting cold outside mirrored the chill in his heart. The small, Spartan room offered no comfort. He paced, he sat, he stared at the rough-hewn walls, replaying Kalen's venomous accusations, his friends' shocked faces, Elias's profound disappointment. The accusations rang true, twisting his insides with shame and bitter regret. The seed of the old magic in his backpack felt utterly inert now, a dead weight, as if completely shut down by the trauma and revelation. But the dark magic within him, though quiet, was a cold, constant hum, a subtle whisper that reminded him of its power, its allure. It felt less like a part of him and more like a separate, malevolent entity biding its time, almost amused by his predicament. The silver locket, still in his pocket, vibrated faintly in sync with this cold hum, a constant, unsettling presence. He wondered if Lyra or Rorik would speak for him, if Elias would try to mitigate his fate. A part of him desperately hoped they would, but a larger, cynical part, fed by years of neglect and now, by the dark power, told him he deserved this solitude. Days bled into a bleak, featureless week. Finally, the heavy, magically sealed door to his cell groaned open. Elias stood there, his face deeply lined, his shoulders heavy. Behind him stood Mistress Lyra, the head seeker of knowledge, her normally serene face etched with a mix of sorrow and stern resolve. Rorik and Lyra were not present, he knew they would not be allowed. "Caleb," Elias began, his voice weary but firm, "the Council of Masters has convened. We have weighed Kalen's testimony against your confession, and we have heard Seraphina's account of her examination." Mistress Lyra stepped forward. "Kalen's actions were reprehensible. He will face severe disciplinary action, and his place in the next level apprenticeship has been revoked. He will be on probation, under strict magical oversight, and his future at this academy is now precarious." Her voice held no sympathy for Kalen. Caleb felt a flicker of grim satisfaction at Kaelin's downfall, but it was fleeting, quickly swallowed by his own impending doom. As for you, Caleb, Elias continued, his gaze unwavering, your actions are of a far graver nature. You knowingly breached forbidden wards. You sought out volatile magic. You corrupted yourself and, by your own confession, twisted the very purpose of the old magic to inflict harm upon another student. And in doing so, you created a beacon, drawing the shadow of the veil to our very gates, imperiling every soul within these walls. Caleb flinched, the weight of his guilt suffocating him. The Academy cannot condone such a violation, nor can it risk the continued presence of such a volatile, corrupted power within its sacred confines, Mistress Lyra stated, her voice formal and chillingly precise. Therefore, the Council has reached its verdict, you are to be banished from the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Banishment. His new home, his purpose, all gone. However, Elias interjected, his gaze softening slightly, given your courage in activating the emergency ward, and the profound, albeit misguided, potential you possess, the banishment is not permanent, nor is it without purpose. You will not simply be cast out. You will be given a quest. The shadow of the veil was drawn to you for a reason, Caleb, and it will continue to seek you out as long as this volatile darkness remains unresolved within you. You must seek out the heart of the forgotten star, a relic spoken of in ancient lore, said to hold the key to either purifying corrupted magic or forging it anew into a balanced force. It is a perilous journey, and one you must undertake alone. You will carry no academy mark, use no academy resources, Mistress Lyra added, her voice softening slightly, almost regretfully. Should you succeed in this quest, should you return having found balance and mastery over all aspects of your power, then, and only then, may you seek readmission. Until then, you are on your own. You must find your own path back to the light, or succumb to the shadow. Caleb looked at Elias, then at Mistress Lyra. They were not simply condemning him, they were offering a terrible, solitary chance. His final, desperate hope that Lyra or Rorik might appear, might offer a plea on his behalf, died. He was truly alone. He clutched his backpack, the cold silence of the seat and the sinister pulse of the locket his only companions on a journey into an unknown future. The heavy gates of the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind swung shut behind Caleb with a resounding thud that echoed the finality of his banishment. The biting mountain wind whipped around him, tearing at his meager clothes. He clutched his worn backpack, the seed of the old magic still inert within it, overshadowed by the cold, unsettling pulse of the silver locket in his pocket. Banishment. A quest for a mythical relic. He was an outcast, alone, heading into an unknown wilderness, carrying a dangerous secret and a burgeoning darkness. Despair was a lead weight in his gut, but beneath it, a sliver of fierce, desperate determination hardened his resolve. He would complete this quest. He would master this darkness. He would prove them all wrong. His first days were grueling. He moved through the snow-laden mountain passes, navigating by the few stars visible through the stormy skies. His old magic, though muted, allowed him to find meager shelter, conjure faint warmth, and purify stagnant water. But the dark magic, though suppressed, left him constantly on edge, whispering temptations, urging him to take shortcuts, to use its raw, brutal force instead of the patient, taxing old magic. He found himself sketching less, his mind too preoccupied with survival and the crushing weight of his banishment. He missed the Academy's warmth, Elias's calm guidance, Lyra's quick wit, Rorik's solid presence. He was truly alone. Weeks passed in a desolate blur of trudging through forests, scrambling over rocky inclines, and shivering through cold nights. He learned to hunt small game, to forage for edible roots, and to sleep with one ear open for the sounds of the wild. His path led him south, following Elias's vague directions towards ancient ley lines, towards tales of forgotten stars. One late afternoon, utterly exhausted and famished, Caleb stumbled upon a small, hidden valley, shielded from the biting wind by tall, ancient pines. In the center, beside a babbling brook that hadn't quite frozen over, sat a peculiar, circular hut fashioned from woven branches and living moss, almost camouflaged against the winter landscape. A thin wisp of smoke curled from its center, carrying the enticing aroma of stew. As Caleb cautiously approached, the hut's low, round door swung open. A figure emerged, surprisingly spry despite their advanced age. This was no stiff, robed academic like Elias. This was Willowen, a short, stout woman with a wild tangle of gray-green hair braided with feathers and beads. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, etched by sun and wind, and her eyes, the color of moss after a rain, sparkling with an almost mischievous warmth. She wore practical, earth-toned clothes adorned with intricately embroidered patterns of leaves and animals, and she carried a gnarled walking stick that looked less like carved wood and more like a living branch. Willowen took one look at Caleb, his gaunt face, his worn clothes, the faint, shimmering aura of discordant magic clinging to him, and her smile softened. "Well now," she said, her voice raspy but kind, like dry leaves rustling. "Looks like the mountain has coughed up a lost soul. And a rather interesting one at that. Full of light, and a surprising amount of shadow." Her gaze lingered for a moment on his backpack, then, disconcertingly, directly on the pocket where the silver locket lay, its faint malevolent pulse seeming to quicken just for a second. Caleb instinctively tensed, ready to deny everything. But Willowen simply beckoned him closer. "No need to look so alarmed, child. Sit. Eat. You look like you're carrying the weight of 1,000 judgments, and running on empty. We can talk about the whispers of darkness another time. For now, warm yourself." Caleb, too weary to resist, and too drawn by the genuine warmth in her eyes and the promise of food, slowly stepped inside the humble, yet surprisingly cozy, hut. The air was filled with the comforting scent of herbs, wood smoke, and warm stew. He hadn't realized how desperately he needed another human presence, especially one that seemed to see him, truly see him, without judgment. Chapter 20, Willowen's Wisdom and the Locket's Secret. The hut, though small, felt impossibly vast with Willowen's presence. The stew was simple but hearty, warming Caleb from the inside out, chasing away the gnawing cold and hunger that had been his constant companions. Willowen watched him eat, her moss-green eyes twinkling, not with judgment, but with a deep, ancient understanding. She offered no probing questions about his journey, no demands for explanation. She simply provided warmth, nourishment, and a silent, comforting presence. For the first time since leaving the academy, Caleb felt a fragile sense of safety, a reprieve from the relentless pressure of his quest and his secret. He spent the night in a surprisingly comfortable bed of furs, falling into the deepest, most restorative sleep he'd had in months. The seat of the old magic felt less heavy, a faint warmth returning, though the silver locket still lay cold against his skin in his pocket. The next morning, after another warm meal, Willowen led Caleb outside to a small, enclosed garden, miraculously thriving amidst the winter snow. Herbs of every color and magical plant life flourished under a subtle, unseen enchantment. Willowen, perched on a moss-covered stone, began to speak, her voice weaving tales of the land, of ancient spirits, and of magic that flowed not through grand spells, but through the deep, intricate connections of life. She didn't directly ask about the academy, or Elias, or the shadow. Instead, she spoke of balance, of the interconnectedness of light and shadow in nature. "The deepest roots seek the darkest earth, young one," she mused, tending to a luminous blue flower, "but they do so to draw nourishment for the brightest bloom. It is not the darkness itself that poisons, but the intent that wields it, and the balance that is broken." Caleb, initially guarded, found himself opening up, subtly at first, about the constant struggle within him, the conflict between the old magic and the cold, powerful surge of the other. He spoke of the fear of losing control, of the ease with which the darker power offered solutions. He still omitted the Chamber of Whispers, the obsidian shard, and Kaelin's blackmail, clinging to that secret even with Willowen. But she seemed to understand the essence of his struggle without needing every detail. She offered no rituals to suppress, no grand spells of purification, but simple exercises to acknowledge and understand both aspects of his power, teaching him grounding techniques and ways to listen to the whisper of his own inner balance. Days turned into another week. Caleb felt a subtle shift, a different kind of balance emerging within him. The dark magic was still there, but it no longer felt like an adversary constantly trying to break free. It felt like a deep, still pool of power he was slowly learning to acknowledge, rather than fear or suppress. He found himself sketching again, capturing the subtle energies of Willowen's garden, drawing patterns that fused light and shadow in intricate, organic ways. One evening, as the stars began to prick the clear mountain sky, Caleb was sitting by the fire, tracing a complex runic pattern in the dirt with a stick. As he moved, the silver locket in his pocket clinked faintly against the wooden box of the seat of the old magic. Willowen, who had been quietly stirring a pot of herbal tea, paused. Her moss-green eyes, which had seemed so gentle, now sharpened, fixing on Caleb's pocket with an intensity that made him freeze. "That trinket you carry," Willowen said, her voice unusually grave. "Your mother's gift, you said." Caleb nodded slowly, his hand instinctively going to his pocket. The locket felt colder than usual, and its faint, malevolent hum seemed to amplify in Willowen's presence. Willowen sighed, a deep, weary sound. "That is no mere trinket, child. It is an old piece of crafting, steeped in a very specific kind of sympathetic magic. Those symbols, they are not for luck. They are a binding ward. A tether, if you will." Caleb frowned, confused. "A tether? For what?" Willowen's gaze was direct, unwavering. "For the darkest desires of the heart. It's a relic of a forgotten branch of shadow weaving, used to subtly manipulate and control. It works by creating a sympathetic link, drawing on the deepest, most vulnerable parts of its wearer, feeding on their despair, their anger, their loneliness. And in doing so, it opens a subtle, unseen pathway. A path to you, and a drain on you." Caleb stared at her, a horrifying realization dawning. He remembered the faint wrongness he'd felt when his mother gave it to him, the way it seemed to pulse in sync with the dark magic, the way it had resonated with Kaelin's blackmail. "Are you saying, it helped the shadow creature find me? That it made me more susceptible to the darkness?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Willowen nodded slowly. "It didn't make you do anything, Caleb. But it created a resonance. That shadow of the veil that attacked the academy, it doesn't just seek raw power. It seeks open wounds, despair, and vulnerability. And that locket, given with whatever unconscious intent your poor mother may have harbored, acted as a beacon, a subtle invitation. It amplified the dark magic within you, feeding its growth and making you more visible, more tempting, to such entities. It was a gift of affection, perhaps, but one that was unknowingly twisted into a key for your future undoing. A betrayal by circumstance, if not by malice." Caleb pulled the locket out, staring at the tarnished silver, his heart aching with a fresh wave of pain. His mother. Unknowing, perhaps, but still, this symbol of her rare attention was, in fact, a tool that had endangered him, amplified his flaws, and led the very darkness he sought to escape right to his new home. The bitter irony was almost unbearable. He held the locket out, as if it were a venomous snake. Can you break it?" Caleb asked, his voice tight with a desperate plea. Willowen took the locket, her gaze thoughtful. "I can sever its active tether, yes. But the link has been forged. The vulnerability remains, a scar that must be healed from within. Your true quest, young Caleb, is not just about finding the heart of the forgotten star, but understanding how to truly mend this wound, how to guard your inner light. And I will help you. This old world needs more menders, young one, and fewer broken souls. She looked at him with a deep, knowing compassion. This journey you are on is about more than banishment. It's about finding true balance, and protecting yourself from within. Chapter 21, Trials of Convergence. Caleb stared at the locket in Willowin's hand, a torrent of emotions warring within him, fresh heartbreak for his mother's unwitting betrayal, anger at the shadowy entity that had exploited her, and a profound, agonizing shame for the role the locket had played in his own downfall at the academy. But beneath it all, a powerful sense of clarity began to emerge. The vague unease, the subtle corruption he'd felt, Elias's confusion, Rorik's suspicion, it all clicked into horrifying place. And with that clarity came a surge of desperate, renewed purpose. He wasn't just banished, he was on a path to truly understand and reclaim himself. You can help me. Caleb managed, his voice thick with a raw hope he hadn't dared to feel in weeks. With the quest? And this. He gestured vaguely at himself, encompassing both the suppressed dark magic and the lingering echoes of the locket's insidious influence. Willowin smiled, a deep, compassionate light in her moss-green eyes. Every journey benefits from a guide, young one, especially when the path winds through the heart's own shadows. Yes, I will help you. The heart of the forgotten star is not merely a destination, but a symbol of the balance you seek. She took the tarnished silver locket from his outstretched hand. Without a word, she placed it on a small, smooth river stone, closed her eyes, and began to hum a low, ancient melody. Her hands, gnarled and wise, moved in intricate patterns above it. A faint, silvery glow emanated from her fingertips, touching the locket. For a moment, the faded symbols on its surface seemed to writhe, and a cold, almost imperceptible whisper, like a sigh of frustration, escaped the locket before it fell completely inert, its subtle malevolent hum finally silenced. The air around it felt neutral again. The active tether is severed, Willowin confirmed, handing it back to him. It felt like just a piece of cold metal now. The direct influence is gone. But remember, the link has been forged. The vulnerability remains, a scar that must be healed from within. Your true quest, young Caleb, is not just about finding the heart of the forgotten star, but understanding how to truly mend this wound, how to guard your inner light. And I will help you. This old world needs more menders, young one, and fewer broken souls. Caleb tucked it away, no longer a source of insidious corruption, but a stark reminder of the path he had chosen and the consequences. Their journey together began, vastly different from Caleb's solitary trek. Willowin didn't lead him with maps or stern instructions, but with intuition and stories. She taught him to listen deeper, not just to the plants, but to the whispers of the earth itself, to the flow of unseen currents in the wind, to the ancient memories held within stones. She showed him how the shadow wasn't inherently evil, but a necessary counterpoint to light, a place of rest, of renewal, of hidden strength, if one knew how to walk within it without being consumed. You have two wells of power within you now, Caleb, Willowin explained one morning as they gathered dew-kissed herbs in a silent glade. The vibrant flow of the old magic, and the deep, still darkness of the void. Elias taught you to favor one and fear the other. I will teach you to acknowledge both, to draw from each without letting either claim you. True balance is not the absence of shadow, but mastery over its presence. Their training wasn't confined to a shed or a chamber. It was woven into their very travels. Willowin pushed him to use his dark magic, but with intent and control, directing it to subtly drain excess energy from a rock slide to stabilize it, or to briefly cloak them in perfect, sound-absorbing shadow when evading a dangerous beast. Each time, she made him reflect on his intention, on the purpose behind the power. The cold hum of the dark magic within him, no longer suppressed, began to feel less like a foreign entity and more like a tool he was learning to wield, though its allure was a constant temptation. The seed of the old magic also responded, its warmth returning fully, as if relieved to be in dialogue, rather than constant conflict, with its counterpart. They traveled through hidden valleys and across desolate plains, guided by ancient lore and Willowwind's uncanny sense of the land. She spoke of the heart of the forgotten star not as a simple relic, but as a nexus of primal energies, a place where the concepts of light and dark, creation and void, were inextricably intertwined. It was a place where one could either find ultimate balance, or be utterly undone. Caleb, no longer just fleeing his past, felt a new, clearer purpose. He was seeking not just a remedy for his banishment, but a way to finally reconcile the warring forces within his very soul. One frigid afternoon, they entered a vast, desolate stretch of land known only as the Whispering Wastes. Here, gnarled, skeletal trees stood stark against a perpetually gray sky, their branches clawing at the emptiness. A chilling wind constantly rustled through them, carrying faint, mournful sounds that seemed to be half whisper, half scream. The air itself felt heavy, stagnant, imbued with an ancient, lingering sorrow. The seat of the old magic felt strangely quiet here, almost watchful, while the deep, cold pool of Caleb's dark magic stirred, a resonant hum that felt disturbingly at home. This place, Willowwind murmured, tightening the scarf around her neck, is touched by a profound corruption. Be mindful, Caleb. The shadows here are not mere illusions. As they delved deeper into the wastes, the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the wind. From behind the gnarled trees, forms began to emerge, not the grand, singular entity that attacked the academy, but smaller, more numerous shadow horrors. They were wisps of sentient darkness, like torn fragments of a tattered cloak, vaguely humanoid in shape, their movements fluid and unnatural. Their eyes, if they could be called that, were pinpricks of dull, malevolent red light, and they moved with a silent, consuming hunger. They were the corrupted souls Willowwind had spoken of, drawn to and twisted by the pervasive darkness of the wastes. Caleb felt a surge of familiar panic, the chilling dread of the academy attack rising within him. The raw power of the dark magic within him screamed to be unleashed, to blast these lesser shadows into oblivion with a brute force that felt so temptingly easy. He felt the cold touch of the silver locket against his chest, urging him towards that destructive path. Remember your balance, Caleb. Willowwind's sharp voice cut through his rising panic. She stood firm beside him, her gnarled staff glowing faintly with a soft, protective light, but she made no move to fight for him. Her eyes were fixed on him, testing. These feed on uncontrolled light, but they are also drawn to raw, untamed darkness. What truly repels them is understanding. Caleb took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing himself to focus. He pushed back against the instinct to lash out. He remembered Willowwind's lessons, acknowledging the shadow, not just fighting it. He closed his eyes for a split second, picturing the deep, still pool of his controlled dark magic, and the vibrant, flowing warmth of the old magic, side by side, in harmony. He wouldn't just repel, he would disarm. When he opened his eyes, he extended his hands. He didn't summon a blinding light. Instead, he drew upon his cultivated understanding of shadow, manipulating the ambient darkness of the wastes themselves. He wove a subtle counterspell, a flowing curtain of shadow that mirrored the very forms of the approaching horrors, but without malice. It wasn't an attack, but a disruption. The shadow horrors recoiled, hissing faintly as his carefully controlled shadow touched them. They found no foothold, no fear to feed upon, no raw energy to consume. The dark magic within Caleb obeyed, not with explosive force, but with intricate precision. The horrors faltered, their forms flickering like dying embers, confused by the controlled nature of the shadow they encountered. They began to unravel, not shattered by pure force, but dissolving into thin, harmless wisps of smoke, unable to sustain their corrupted forms in the face of balanced intent. Caleb stood, breathing heavily, the dark magic within him settled, no longer craving violence, but a quiet, almost satisfied hum of control. The seed of the old magic pulsed with a gentle warmth, acknowledging the cooperation. He looked at Willowen, who nodded, a proud, knowing smile on her face. "You have truly begun to learn, Caleb," she said softly. "You have walked with the shadow, and emerged unconsumed. This place still holds dangers, but you now have the tools to face them." She then pointed a gnarled finger towards a distant, shimmering haze on the horizon, barely visible through the perpetual gloom. "The heart of the forgotten star stirs. We are close." Guided by Willowin's uncanny sense and the faint, almost imperceptible pull of the heart of the forgotten star, they finally emerged from the whispering wastes. Before them lay not a mountain peak or a hidden grotto, but a vast, shimmering expanse that seemed to defy the very laws of reality. It was a boundless, swirling nebula of pure starlight and cosmic shadow, contained within an invisible sphere that pulsed with an indescribable, ancient power. This was the heart of the forgotten star, not a literal star, but a nexus of creation and void, a place where the universe's fundamental forces converged, resonating with all forms of magic. The air here crackled with raw energy, vibrating with a hum that Caleb felt deep in his very bones. Floating around this cosmic anomaly were figures robed in deep indigo, their faces serene and ancient, the guardians of the star. They were not aggressive, but their presence radiated an immense, unyielding power, holding Caleb and Willowen firmly in place at the edge of the anomaly. Among them, Caleb recognized the faint, familiar signatures of highly advanced old magic, and something else, a profound neutrality that observed all. One guardian, whose eyes shimmered like distant galaxies, stepped forward. "You seek the heart of the forgotten star, young one," their voice echoed, not from their lips, but directly within Caleb's mind. "Its secrets are not freely given. Its power is not for the unworthy or the unbalanced. You carry the mark of both light and deep shadow. To pass, you must face the 10 trials of convergence. Each will push you beyond what you believe possible. Fail, and you will become part of the star's endless cycle." Willowen placed a reassuring hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Remember what I taught you, Caleb," she whispered. "Listen. And find your balance." The guardians separated Caleb from Willowen, ushering him into the shimmering expanse. The air shimmered, and the periphery of his vision blurred, plunging him into the first trial. He found himself in an illusory maze of shifting light and shadow, a labyrinth where every path seemed to promise safety but led only to deception. Walls shimmered and vanished as he approached, only to reform behind him. Voices, seemingly from Elias, Lyra, and Rorik, called out conflicting directions, some urging him forward, others warning of danger, their tones laced with a subtle malice. His every instinct screamed at him to choose the brightest, most obvious path, to blast away the illusions with raw old magic. But the shadows of the maze were impossibly convincing, twisting and turning, making him doubt his own senses. The dark magic within him hummed, offering a tempting shortcut, to simply obliterate everything with raw power, leaving no illusions behind. He closed his eyes, remembering Willowin's teaching, to truly see light, one must understand shadow. He pushed down the panic, pushed down the urge for brute force. He didn't try to dispel the illusions, but to see beyond them. He drew on the controlled dark magic, not to attack, but to perceive. He sought the essence of nothingness, the true void beneath the shimmering falsehoods. He let his senses expand, feeling for the subtle energy leaks, the faint points where the illusions weren't quite real. He began to discern faint lines of absence, threads of true void that pierced through the shimmering lies. He opened his eyes, and instead of a solid wall, he saw only a faint shimmer in the space, a place where reality truly ended. He walked through what appeared to be solid walls, seeing their non-existence, following the unseen currents of void, emerging into a new, quiet space as the maze dissolved behind him. The quiet space shattered as a new environment bloomed around him. The air filled with deafening, clashing magical frequencies, a cacophony that vibrated through his very bones, threatening to shatter his mind and tear his magic apart. Pure arcane energy howled against chaotic raw force, destructive spells ripped against healing pulses, and the very ground beneath him groaned in protest. It was a symphony of magical chaos, utterly overwhelming, demanding that he harmonize it or be destroyed. His seed of the old magic pulsed erratically, trying to counter the overwhelming noise, but it was like a single bell against a crashing storm. The dark magic, however, found a strange, grim rhythm in the chaos, urging him to embrace the dissonance, to use it to tear everything apart. Caleb clutched his head, the vibrations agonizing. He remembered Elias's lessons on resonance and Willowwind's words about weaving. He couldn't fight all the frequencies at once. He had to listen, not to silence, but to understand. He reached for the pure warmth of the seed, letting its soothing energy flow, but simultaneously acknowledged the jarring, chaotic notes with the detached, analytical understanding granted by his controlled dark magic. He didn't try to force the sounds into submission, but to find a pattern. He focused on the underlying rhythm of both harmony and chaos, gently nudging the most discordant frequencies to align, not perfectly, but in a way that lessened their destructive clash. He wove a subtle counter-frequency, a pattern of acceptance that absorbed and transformed the raw dissonance into a resonant, complex hum. The chaotic roar subsided, replaced by a strange, beautiful, and profoundly powerful, deep chord that hummed around him. The humming chamber faded, replaced by a swirling mist that solidified into chillingly real visions. Figures of his past flickered around him, Liam's sneering face, Seraphina's devastated expression as her charm failed, the blurred, indifferent eyes of his drunken parents, the crushing weight of Elias's disappointment, and the biting cold of his banishment. A seductive voice, familiar to the shadow of the veil, slithered into his mind, promising boundless power if he would just unleash his darkness. Crush them, Caleb. Make them feel your pain. The Academy rejected you. Your family neglected you. Take what is owed. With my power, you can have ultimate control, never be weak again. The dark magic within him pulsed with a hungry agreement, promising swift vengeance, an easy path to mastery over those who had wronged him. Caleb gasped, the images and whispers attacking his resolve. His hands clenched. The temptation was immense, an almost unbearable allure. He felt the cold, familiar satisfaction of the dark power rising, ready to drown out the pain. But he saw Elias's earnest face, heard Willowwind's calm voice, magic born of anger consumes the wielder, find your balance. He looked at the illusory Lyra and Rorik, their faces innocent, trusting. He couldn't betray that. He stood firm, acknowledging the pain, the anger, the sorrow. He didn't fight the emotions directly, but rather, he allowed the old magic to flow through him, not as a shield, but as an open, vulnerable acceptance. He embraced compassion not for his tormentors, but for himself, for the hurt, lonely boy he had been. He accepted his past, his mistakes, his flaws, letting the pure light of the seed radiate outwards, engulfing the visions. The figures didn't explode or vanish, they softened, their malice fading into wistful echoes before dissolving into mist, leaving Caleb profoundly weary but resolute. The mist evaporated, plunging him into utter, suffocating blackness. It was not merely the absence of light, but a void devoid of sound, of sensation, of anything. Panic clawed at him, a primal terror of non-existence. He stretched out his hands, feeling nothing. He tried to call out, but no sound escaped his lips. His old magic felt lost, unable to grasp onto anything in this null space. The dark magic within him, however, found a strange, unsettling comfort in the void, urging him to simply let go, to dissolve into the emptiness, promising peace. He remembered Willowwind's counterintuitive lesson, To truly master darkness, you must become it, without being it. He forced himself to breathe, slowing his racing heart. He didn't try to create light. Instead, he reached for the deepest, most controlled part of his dark magic. He used it not to destroy, but to perceive the void itself. He stretched his senses into the nothingness, feeling for its texture, its subtle currents, the imperceptible differences in its absolute uniformity. He felt the flow of the void, the presence of its absence, and began to discern a faint, almost non-existent path. He walked forward, one step at a time, guided by this perception of nothing, until a shimmering portal appeared before him, beckoning him onward. He stepped through the portal, and the absolute blackness gave way to a scene of utter desolation. He stood before a vast, arid wasteland. The earth was cracked and bone-dry, nothing but dust stretching to a horizon beneath a sky like tarnished brass. Every plant was a skeletal husk, every pool of water a cracked, empty basin. He felt the overwhelming emptiness, the absence of life, a profound ache that mirrored the barrenness of his early home life. He had to bring forth life. The task seemed immense, impossible for a single person. The dark magic whispered of quick, brutal changes ripping water from underground, forcing growth, but always leaving a trace of unnaturalness, of consumption, a solution that felt too much like the easy way out. Caleb closed his eyes, recalling the sapling, the injured bird, Elias's lessons on life's interconnectedness, and Willowwind's emphasis on true growth. He didn't try to force life. He reached solely for the seed of the old magic, letting its purest warmth flow from his very core. He placed his hands on the parched earth, and poured his energy into it, visualizing the deep roots, the intricate network of the soil, the patient waiting for rain. It was agonizingly slow, his energy draining with every breath, as if coaxing a dying star back to life. He poured his own vital essence into the soil, trusting in the power of natural cycles, in the inherent will of life to persist, focusing on the desire for life. Slowly, impossibly, a single, verdant sprout pushed through the cracked earth, then another, spreading a wave of green. A trickle of pure, clear water bubbled from a rock. The wasteland sighed, gently accepting the renewal, its colors slowly returning to a soft, hopeful green, and then, a new portal shimmered before him. He stepped through, and the verdant landscape dissolved, replaced by a haunting, ethereal realm. Figures made of swirling smoke, mirroring his deepest regrets and the pain he had caused, rose around him. Serafina, her face filled with despair and disappointment, stared at him, her lips forming silent accusations. Elias, his eyes filled with profound sorrow, silently shook his head, his disappointment a tangible weight. Rorik, his gaze cold with suspicion, turned his back. And worst of all, his mother, her face clearer than he'd seen it in years, held out the tarnished silver locket, her eyes filled with a desperate, unwitting malice, embodying the innocent origin of a terrible betrayal. They spoke his failures, his betrayals, his deep-seated guilt. They didn't attack, but their presence was a suffocating torment, threatening to drown him in remorse. The dark magic within him screamed for defiance, to lash out, to make these manifestations disappear, to justify his actions, to become numb. But he remembered Willowwind's guidance on acknowledging emotional shadows, and Elias's lessons on compassion. He couldn't fight them. He had to accept them. He channeled the old magic, not for offensive power, but as an open, vulnerable flow of empathy. He acknowledged their pain, and more importantly, he acknowledged his own. He didn't try to deny his mistakes with Serafina, or Elias's disappointment, or Rorik's suspicion, or his mother's complicated love. He embraced the feelings, let them wash over him, and released them with a deep, cleansing breath. He sent out pure, understanding acceptance, a silent promise to heal these wounds, within himself and, if possible, externally. The figures didn't vanish in a flash, but slowly, gently dissolved, their accusations softening into a shared understanding, their sorrow seeming to lift as they returned to the mist, leaving Caleb with a heavy heart, but one that was now accepting, not burdened by denial. As the last echo faded, another portal opened. He stepped through, and the mist evaporated, plunging him into a maelstrom of raw, untamed elements. A searing inferno roared on one side, a crushing tidal wave thundered on another, a howling blizzard raged behind him, and the earth beneath his feet violently splintered and reformed. He had to survive and adapt, facing all elements at once, each threatening instant annihilation. The pure old magic felt overwhelmed, unable to control such rampant destruction. The dark magic clamored for release, to fight fire with cold, to shatter earth with shadows, but he knew that would only escalate the chaos, mirroring the destructive power it was trying to control. Caleb remembered Willowwind's lessons on finding balance within chaos, on integrating forces. He didn't try to master one element. Instead, he wove together his understanding of both. He used the adaptable, protective nature of the old magic to shield himself, to bend with the wind, to part the waves, to cushion the earth's jolts. Simultaneously, he used the dark magic, not to destroy, but to absorb and redirect the most destructive energies, channeling them safely away or into neutral conduits. He drew the excess heat from the fire, pulling the power from the crushing wave, channeling the chaotic force of the blizzard into a neutral flow. He became a living vortex of balance, a dance of controlled chaos, moving with the elements rather than against them, emerging unscathed as a new, shimmering door appeared. He walked through the shimmering door, and the elemental fury vanished, leaving Caleb in a vast, silent space. Before him, suspended in the air, was a colossal, shimmering sphere of pure starlight, crackling with unimaginable magical pressure. It was dense, impossibly heavy, radiating raw, primordial power. The guardian's voice echoed in his mind, "Move it. Not by force, but by will. Its weight is the weight of 1,000 stars." Caleb strained, pushing with all his physical and magical might, but the sphere was immovable. The seat of the old magic felt minuscule against its immensity, while the dark magic, though powerful, seemed too crude, too blunt, to manipulate such a cosmic mass. He stopped, frustrated, breathing heavily. He realized this wasn't about brute force, nor solely about the subtle touch of old magic. It was about understanding the burden. He closed his eyes, extending his consciousness to the sphere, sensing its composition pure starlight, but also the cosmic shadow that gave it form, the dense void that held it together. He drew from both the luminous energy of his seat and the deep, raw, gravitational power of his dark magic, blending them perfectly, no longer trying to separate or suppress. He envisioned them merging, interweaving, becoming a single, perfectly balanced force of cosmic will. He didn't push the sphere, he enveloped it, understanding its core, finding its resonant frequency. The moment his internal balance clicked into place, the sphere didn't move by brute force, it simply lifted, light as a feather, under his perfectly balanced will, floating effortlessly where he willed it. He had mastered the impossible weight by becoming one with its essence, and then, a portal of swirling light opened at his feet. He stepped onto a thin, shimmering bridge that stretched across an abyss. From either side, two colossal rivers of energy roared towards him, threatening to tear him apart. One was blazing white light, pure and overwhelming, the other abyssal black, a churning vortex of void, cold and devouring. The guardian's voice instructed, "Merge them. Become the conduit. Achieve singularity." This was the ultimate test of balance, a direct challenge to reconcile the two opposing forces he now commanded within himself. His internal magic churned, resisting the natural inclination of light to repel dark, of creation to clash with void. Caleb stepped onto the bridge, placing himself directly in the path of the converging currents. He didn't try to block them, or to choose one over the other. He became a conduit, a living nexus. He allowed the blazing white light to flow through one side of his being, feeling its invigorating warmth, and simultaneously allowed the abyssal black to flow through the other, embracing its profound stillness and depth. He became the meeting point, the crucible where pure light and pure shadow met, not in conflict, but in perfect, impossible equilibrium. It was an agonizing process, his body trembling under the strain, his mind on the verge of splintering as he maintained this perfect, absolute balance. But he held, finding a point of perfect harmony within himself, allowing the two grand rivers of power to slowly, majestically, intertwine around and through him, forming a single, shimmering river of perfectly balanced gray, moving as one, perfectly whole. He had become convergence itself, and the bridge dissolved, leaving him in a new, final chamber. The merged river of light and shadow flowed away, leaving Caleb in a serene, shimmering chamber bathed in the soft, ambient glow of balanced magic. Before him, suspended in the air, was the heart of the forgotten star itself, a pulsating orb of pure, primordial energy, a tiny galaxy contained within itself, radiating immense wisdom. It no longer seemed threatening, but inviting, a source of ultimate knowledge. The guardian's voice, now soft and resonating with deep approval, echoed, "You have walked the paths of light and shadow. You have endured the trials of chaos and harmony. Why do you seek this power? What is your ultimate purpose?" Caleb looked at the heart, its swirling energies mirroring the balance he had achieved within himself. He thought of the academy gates, of Elias, Lyra, and Rorik. He remembered the lurking shadow of the veil, and the chilling truth of his mother's locket. He thought of the brokenness of his past, and the lessons Willowen had given him. He had faced his flaws, his anger, his fear, and found strength not in suppressing them, but in understanding them. "I seek it," he said, his voice clear and resonant, filled with a newfound maturity and conviction, "not for dominance, not for vengeance, and not to erase who I was. I seek it to understand balance. To master the light and the shadow within me, to wield them both with intention and responsibility. I seek this power so that I may defend those I care for, mend what is broken by imbalance, and stand as a true force of harmony against the darkness that seeks to corrupt not just magic, but life itself. I seek to be whole, so I can truly be a guardian and a healer in a world that desperately needs it." As his words faded, the heart of the forgotten star pulsed, its light intensifying, its shadows deepening, before it slowly, majestically, began to descend towards Caleb, bathing him in its primordial glow, accepting his purpose, acknowledging his hard-won balance. Chapter 22, The Final Confrontation. Just as the heart of the forgotten star reached out, its radiant energy beginning to envelop Caleb, a jarring, sickening tear ripped through the serene atmosphere of the chamber. The pure light of the star flickered, battling against a sudden, profound cold. From the very fabric of the chamber's shadows, not the ambient ones Caleb had learned to command, but a deeper, more ancient darkness, the shadow of the veil erupted. It was no longer a vague form or a wispy horror. It coalesced into a colossal, monstrous entity, its inky blackness swirling with malevolent intelligence. Two fiery red eyes, burning with furious intent, blazed from its form, fixed on Caleb. Its shadowy tendrils, now thick and sharp like obsidian blades, lashed out, attempting to snatch the descending heart and crush Caleb within its grasp. "You thought yourself clever, little mage," a voice, 1,000 whispers of malice, echoed directly in Caleb's mind, colder and more enraged than ever. "You thought you could escape what truly calls to you. Your mother's gift, it opened a path even into this sacred place. It is the perfect conduit for my power. You are mine, Caleb. And so is this heart. You brought me to it." Caleb gasped, a profound shock ripping through him. The locket. Even severed, it had created a resonance, a lingering trail the shadow had exploited to follow him, to breach even the guardian's defenses. The ultimate betrayal. The heart of the forgotten star pulsed frantically, recoiling slightly from the encroaching darkness. The guardians' voices cried out warnings, but they seemed unable to directly intervene in this final, personal conflict. This was Caleb's fight, a direct consequence of his past choices. The battle for the heart, and for Caleb's very soul, had begun. The shadow of the veil, sensing his moment of vulnerability and betrayal, surged forward, its form growing, threatening to swallow the entire chamber in eternal night. Caleb, still weak from the trials, felt the cold despair of its presence, but the balanced powers within him, the newly harmonized old magic and his controlled dark magic, flared with fierce defiance. He had to fight. He had to claim the star. The shadow lunged. Caleb barely reacted, a tendril of pure night slamming into his chest, throwing him violently backward. He hit the shimmering floor with a sickening thud, the wind knocked from his lungs. The shadow loomed over him, its form expanding, threatening to swallow the entire chamber in eternal night, its red eyes burning directly into his soul. Despair, boy. Your past is a festering wound. Your friends will turn from you. Your master cast you out. You are nothing but a broken vessel, perfect for my embrace. The whispers intensified, assaulting his mind, dredging up every failure, every moment of fear and loneliness. But Caleb, though battered, refused to break. He remembered Willowwind's lessons on acknowledging, not succumbing. He recalled Elias's words on intent. The seed of the old magic, now fully reawakened from the trials, pulsed with furious defiance. The controlled dark magic within him, no longer a source of insidious temptation but a tool, responded to his will. He didn't try to simply blast the shadow with pure light. It would only feed on such raw, uncontained energy. Instead, Caleb rolled, pushing off the ground, and met the shadow's next lunge not with a shield, but with a complex weave of light and shadow. He channeled the old magic to create a shimmering aura of repulsion, not physically pushing, but magically disentangling the shadow's essence. Simultaneously, he drew on his controlled dark magic, forming sharp, intricate void blades from the ambient darkness of the chamber itself. These were not light, nor were they raw energy. They were precisely crafted absences, slices of pure void that could cut the very fabric of the shadow. The first void blade sliced through a lashing tendril, causing the shadow to shriek, a sound like tearing silk. It recoiled, its form flickering, its malevolent eyes narrowing. It hadn't expected such a precise, unconventional attack. The shadow adapted. It shifted its form, becoming a swirling vortex of impenetrable darkness, absorbing all light, all sound. It began to send out psychic barbs, piercing Caleb's mind with images of his worst fears, his parents dying, the academy consumed by shadows, Lyra and Rorik frozen like the young students he'd seen. The silver locket in his pocket felt like it was burning, attempting to reassert its influence, to open itself and become a portal for more darkness. Caleb cried out as the mental assault threatened to overwhelm him. He stumbled, falling to one knee. This was the shadow's true power, not just brute force, but corruption of the mind. He forced his thoughts to the heart of the forgotten star, still hovering, still waiting. He remembered his declaration of purpose, his vow to defend, to heal. He mentally pushed against the locket, envisioning it as a neutral, inert object, severing its lingering psychic link. He then channeled the old magic into his mind, not to block the barbs, but to purify them, to make his thoughts too clear, too resilient for the shadow's lies. Simultaneously, he used his dark magic to create internal void filters, siphoning off the most poisonous of the shadow's whispers, turning them to harmless nothingness before they could take root. "You cannot break me!" Caleb roared, pushing himself back to his feet, his defiance burning bright. The shadow shrieked, enraged. It condensed its form, becoming a monstrous, multi-limbed entity made of pure, solidified gloom. It lunged again, faster this time, its claws tearing through the air, trying to physically rip him apart. Caleb prepared his final, desperate strategy. He didn't just meet the attack. As the shadow closed in, he unleashed a complex, perfectly synchronized fusion of his powers. From his left hand, the seed of the old magic blazed forth, not as a direct blast, but as a swirling vortex of pure, radiant binding light. It wrapped around the shadow's limbs, not burning, but constraining, forcing its form to solidify, making its elusive essence tangible. At the exact same moment, from his right hand, the controlled dark magic erupted, not as destructive energy, but as a gravitational sink of void. It didn't push or pull. It created an area of concentrated nothingness, drawing the shadow's very being inward, collapsing its form, pulling it into a point of utter anti-existence. The shadow roared, a sound of unimaginable agony and pure hatred. It struggled, its solidified form twisting violently within the radiant binding light, trying to tear free from the collapsing void. It was being forced to confront its own essence, light and dark, in perfect, inescapable balance. The fight was less about brute force now, and more about spiritual and magical convergence. Caleb pushed harder, gritting his teeth, pouring every last ounce of his strength, his will, his newfound balance into the attack. The light constrained, the void consumed, and the shadow's massive form began to shrink, to condense, its blazing red eyes dimming, flickering like dying embers. With one final, ear-splitting shriek that tore at the fabric of the chamber, the shadow of the veil imploded. It didn't explode into a shower of sparks, nor did it simply vanish. It collapsed inward, turning into a tiny, dense mote of pure, contained darkness, utterly inert, utterly powerless, before winking out of existence entirely. The terrifying cold vanished, replaced by a profound, cleansing warmth. Caleb stood, swaying on his feet, utterly spent. The seed of the old magic throbbed with immense exhaustion, but also a deep, quiet contentment. The dark magic within him was utterly silent, subdued, no longer a source of conflict but a perfectly integrated, dormant well of power. He had done it. He had faced his greatest fear, his greatest mistake, and defeated it, not by destroying the darkness, but by finding mastery over it through balance. The guardians of the star, who had watched the entire brutal confrontation in silent judgment, now stepped forward, their faces filled with a serene approval. The heart of the forgotten star, which had recoiled during the battle, now pulsed with renewed vigor, its radiant energy reaching out fully to Caleb. It descended, settling gently into his outstretched hands, bathing him in a cosmic glow that permeated his very being, filling him not with raw power, but with profound understanding and balance. It was a true merging, the culmination of his arduous journey. Caleb, the discarded boy, the corrupted mage, was now a true wielder of convergence, a guardian of harmony between light and shadow. Chapter 23, The Master of Convergence. The heart of the forgotten star pulsed in Caleb's hands, a tiny galaxy contained within his grasp. Its light flowed into him, settling not as a surge of raw power, but as an overwhelming sense of profound balance. The seed of the old magic and the once corrupting dark power within him now resonated in perfect harmony, two distinct but intertwined forces, finally at peace. Exhaustion, immense and bone-deep, washed over him, but it was accompanied by a quiet, triumphant satisfaction he had never known. As the heart gently merged with his being, becoming a constant, internal presence, Willowen appeared at his side. Her moss-green eyes, filled with a deep understanding and pride, studied him. "You did it, young one," she murmured, her voice soft but resonant. "You didn't just defeat the shadow, you showed it the path to its own balance. You are truly a wielder of convergence." Caleb felt a new energy stirring within him, not just magical, but a profound inner peace. He looked at Willowen, his new guide, then back towards the distant peaks where the Arcane Academy of Whisperwind lay hidden. His banishment. His purpose. He had found what he sought, and more. I need to go back, Caleb said, his voice stronger, imbued with a quiet authority he hadn't possessed before. I need to face the Academy Masters. I need to show them what I've learned, what I've become. And I need to help Elias. Willowen nodded, a knowing smile gracing her ancient face. The path of a true guardian is not always easy, Caleb. Sometimes it means returning to the very places that cast you out. But you do not return as the boy who was banished. You return as the master of your own light and shadow. The journey back to the Arcane Academy was a reversal of his solitary exile, this time with Willowen as his companion. She didn't teach him new spells on the way, but deepened his understanding of the forces already within him. She spoke of the delicate web of magic that bound the world, and how his newly found balance could mend tears in its fabric, not just with power, but with understanding. Upon their arrival, the Academy Masters were already gathered, their faces stern, expecting to find Caleb either broken or consumed by darkness. But as Caleb and Willowen stepped into the Grand Council chamber, a hush fell. The air around Caleb was different, it no longer carried the subtle discord of his corrupted power. Instead, it hummed with a profound, undeniable harmony of light and shadow, a balanced force that resonated with the ancient ley lines of the Academy itself. Elias, who sat among the masters, looked at Caleb with wide, astonished eyes, a flicker of pure hope replacing the deep sorrow he had carried. Caleb stood tall, no longer the timid, overshadowed boy. He spoke with a clear, resonant voice, recounting his journey, the trials, his battle with the shadow of the veil, and the ultimate acceptance of the heart of the forgotten star within him. He didn't shy away from confessing his initial deceit, his entry into the Chamber of Whispers, or Kaelin's blackmail and Seraphina's sabotage. He explained how the locket, his mother's unwitting gift, had inadvertently amplified his vulnerabilities and served as a beacon for the shadow, and how Willowen had helped him understand and sever its influence. The masters listened in stunned silence. When he finished, Elias rose, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. He speaks the truth, he declared, his gaze sweeping over his fellow masters. I felt the lingering darkness when he first came to me, but I now feel the profound balance he has achieved. He has done what few could ever dream. He has faced the abyss within and without, and emerged whole. Mistress Lyra, the head seeker, stepped forward. The heart of the forgotten star, a legend, brought into being. Caleb, you have not merely passed your quest, you have redefined mastery. Your understanding of both light and shadow, not as opposing forces but as convergent powers, is unprecedented. The council, after much deliberation, made its decision. Kaelin, already disciplined, was stripped of all magical privileges and assigned to menial tasks, his academic future utterly extinguished. Seraphina was offered a chance to retake her exam with the Academy's full support, and a formal apology. And Caleb? He was not only reinstated but elevated. He would continue his studies under Elias, but now, Willowen also formally joined the Academy as a revered CO mentor, bringing her unique wisdom of wild magic and balance to the institution. Caleb now had two masters, each guiding him to new heights of understanding. Over the ensuing years, Caleb's legend grew. He delved deeper into the mysteries of the cosmos, into the subtle art of true healing, and into the intricate dance of creation and void. He could mend not just broken objects or bodies, but tears in the very fabric of magical ley lines. He could soothe corrupted spirits and guide chaotic energies back to their source. His understanding of the heart of the forgotten star allowed him to perceive the universe in ways no one had before. He became Elias's successor, and then, eventually, a figure of myth himself. He never sought power for power's sake, remembering the lessons of the shadow, Kaelin, and his own past. He wielded his light with compassion and his shadow with wisdom, finding harmony in every act. He was the guardian the world needed, a beacon of balance. Caleb, the once lost boy from the city, the student who had fallen to darkness, had, through immense struggle and the courage to confront himself, become the most powerful wizard to ever live, a true master of convergence, weaving the threads of light and shadow into a tapestry of unparalleled magic.